They threw the first stone before she even reached the gate. Elara Voss didn't flinch. Blood trickled down her temple, warm against the morning cold, but she kept walking. The Iron Peak border pack had perfected their hatred over 3 years, each insult sharper than the last, each threat more inventive. Today, a young wolf spat at her feet and hissed, "Your father's blood should have painted these walls." She wiped the blood from her face and kept moving toward the sealed fortress on the hill. Toward the Alpha, everyone said was already dead. Toward the man she refused to stop believing in. If you want to see how a despised outcast defies an entire pack to heal the monster they fear most, stay until the end, like this video, and comment which city you're watching from. The border town of Asheville had 2 rules that everyone followed without question. First, never speak kindly of the Voss family. Their treachery 3 years ago had cost too much blood, too many lives, too much trust. The second rule was simpler and more brutal. If you saw Elara Voss walking through town, you made her regret it. She'd learned to walk with her head up anyway. The sun hadn't fully crested the eastern ridge when Elara stepped onto the gravel path that led from the outer settlements into Asheville proper. Her healer's satchel hung heavy across one shoulder, filled with supplies she'd spent half the night gathering. Wolfsbane antidote, silvervale moss for infection, crushed moon petal for fever reduction, blackroot extract for pain. Sterile bandages she'd boiled 3 times over. None of it mattered to the people here. They didn't care what she carried. They cared what her last name was. The air smelled like pine smoke and early frost. Winter was coming to the northern territories, and it would be harsh this year. Elara could feel it in her bones, the way her grandmother used to predict storms. The old woman had been a healer too, before the war, before everything fell apart. She'd taught Elara which plants stopped bleeding and which ones eased pain. Which songs calmed frightened children, and which prayers honored the dead. She died 6 months after the attack, heartbroken by what her son had done. Elara tried not to think about that. Murderer's daughter. The voice came from her left, a woman she didn't recognize, middle-aged, with the hard eyes of someone who'd lost family in the attack. She stood in the doorway of a butcher's shop, arms crossed, mouth twisted in disgust. Elara didn't turn. She'd learned that too. Eye contact only made it worse. "Walk into your boyfriend's grave?" another voice called out, younger this time, mocking. "Gonna cry over the corpse?" Laughter rippled through the small crowd beginning to gather near the market square. Morning vendors setting up their stalls paused to watch. A few children pointed. One threw a pebble that bounced off Elara's boot. She tightened her grip on the satchel strap and kept walking. The fortress was still half a mile away, uphill. Past the watch posts and the memorial stones and the place where they'd burned her father's body after the trial. Past the fountain where they'd found the first victims, foaming at the mouth, convulsing from the poison that had been slipped into the water supply during what was supposed to be a peace gathering. 43 wolves had died that day, 17 of them children. Elara had watched the executions. The whole pack had been required to witness it, her father, her uncle, the 3 others who'd helped plan the attack. They'd been given a trial, brief and brutal. Her father had confessed, said he'd done it for the good of their people, to weaken the Iron Peak territory before a larger assault. He'd shown no remorse. Elara had vomited twice during the proceedings. "My son died because of your pack." A man's voice cut through the murmurs. And this one was different. This one shook with something rawer than anger. Elara slowed despite herself, just for a second, and saw him. An older wolf, gray-haired, leaning against a doorway with eyes that weren't full of rage, just emptiness, just grief that had nowhere left to go. He was 16, and your people poisoned the water supply during the peace talks. You know what that does to a young wolf's system? Elara stopped walking. She shouldn't have. She knew better. But something in the man's voice made her pause. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back." "No," she whispered. "It doesn't." The man stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back inside. Shoulders slumped, and Elara felt the weight of it pressed down on her chest like a physical thing. This was why she walked this path every day. Not because she thought it would change anything, but because someone from her bloodline needed to witness what had been done. Someone needed to stand in the space where forgiveness was impossible and try anyway. The stone hit her shoulder before she could start walking again. Not hard enough to break bone, but hard enough to send her stumbling sideways. Pain bloomed hot and immediate. She caught herself against a wooden post, breathing through it, and looked up to see who'd thrown it. Garrick. He stood in the middle of the path, another rock already in his hand. He was maybe 19, 20, with the kind of lean muscle that came from hard labor and harder training. His eyes were dark and full of something that looked almost like grief, but came out as fury. She knew his story. Everyone knew everyone's story in Asheville. His sister had been one of the 17 children. She'd been 8 years old. "You don't get to apologize," Garrick said, his voice tight and trembling. "You don't get to walk through here like you're some kind of saint doing penance. Your father was the architect. Your mother helped him mix the poison. And you—" He threw the second stone. It caught her in the ribs, just below the satchel. "You stood by and did nothing." Elara's breath hitched. She pressed a hand to her side, felt the bruise already forming. "I didn't know. I was 17. I didn't know what they were planning." Liar. The third stone hit her knee. She went down hard, palms scraping against gravel, skin tearing. The satchel spilled open. Glass vials rolled across the dirt, one of them shattering, precious medicine seeping into the dust like wasted blood. Elara knelt there, breathing through the pain, staring at the broken vial. 3 weeks of work. 3 weeks of gathering the right herbs, grinding them by hand, brewing the extract in careful measured doses. Gone. She heard footsteps. Garrick was walking toward her. "Get up," he said. "Get up so I can knock you down again." Elara didn't get up. Instead, she carefully gathered the unbroken vials, one by one, checking each for cracks, making sure the seals were still intact. Her fingers were bleeding. Small cuts from the gravel, nothing serious. She'd clean them later. When everything salvageable was secured back in the satchel, she rose to her feet, slowly, deliberately. She met Garrick's eyes and said quietly, "I'm going to keep walking now." "To the dead Alpha's prison?" Garrick laughed, bitter and sharp as broken glass. "He's been rotting in there for 3 years. No one's seen him. No one's heard from him. The council declared him lost. He's probably already corpse-fed by now, and you're wasting your time pretending you can fix what your family broke." Elara adjusted the satchel strap over her uninjured shoulder. "Maybe, but I'm still going." "Why?" The question came from someone else in the crowd, a woman with a scarred face and exhausted eyes, someone who looked like she'd stopped being surprised by cruelty a long time ago. "Why do you keep coming back here? We hate you. We'll always hate you. Nothing you do will ever change that. So what's the point?" It was a fair question. Elara had asked herself the same thing every morning for 217 days. She looked at the woman for a long moment, then simply, "Because someone has to." Has to what? Try. The word hung in the air between them. Garrick's hand tightened on the stone he was holding, but he didn't throw it. The crowd shifted, murmuring, uncertain. No one quite knew what to do with an answer like that. Elara walked past Garrick, past the crowd, past the memorial stones carved with the names of the dead. Her daughter's name was on one of those stones, not from the poisoning, but from the retaliation that had come after. A raid, quick and vicious. They'd killed everyone in her father's household, everyone except Elara. She'd been spared because she'd been at the healer's cottage, learning how to set a broken bone. Sometimes she wondered if that had been mercy or punishment. No one threw another stone as she left the market square. They just watched her go, silent and seething, the way they always did. The path up to the fortress was steep and rocky, worn smooth in places by centuries of feet. Once, this had been a well-traveled road. Merchants, diplomats, pack members coming to petition the Alpha. Now it was just Elara, walking alone, counting her steps to keep her mind from wandering. 217 steps from the market square to the first watchpost. 346 to the memorial garden, 512 to the outer gates. She'd counted them so many times she could walk it with her eyes closed. The fortress loomed at the top of the hill like a skeleton of what it used to be. Once, it had been the pride of the Iron Peak territory, a stronghold built from gray stone and dark timber, with towers that overlooked the valley and walls thick enough to withstand a siege. Alpha Kale Draven had ruled from here with a combination of sharp intellect and unshakable strength. Elara had only seen him once, years ago, at a treaty gathering before everything fell apart. She'd been 15, barely old enough to attend. Her father had brought her as a learning experience to show her how pack politics worked. She'd sat in the back of the hall, quiet and watchful, while the adults argued over territorial boundaries and trade agreements. Kale Draven had been maybe 24, 25. Younger than most alphas, but no one questioned his authority. He'd sat at the head of the table with an economy of movement that suggested he didn't waste energy on anything unnecessary. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that seemed to catalog every person in the room and assign them a level of threat. He hadn't smiled much during the negotiations, but when he did, once when an elder made a joke about the futility of arguing over a stretch of barren land that not even the goats wanted, the whole room had relaxed, like they'd been waiting for permission to breathe. Elara remembered thinking he seemed lonely, powerful, yes, respected, absolutely, but lonely. Now, the fortress was a tomb. The main gates were sealed with iron chains and warding glyphs that hummed faintly with old magic. No one went in. No one came out. The pack had declared Kyle Draven lost. Not dead, because no body had been recovered, but lost. Poisoned during the attack, blinded by the toxins her father's people had engineered, he'd retreated into the fortress and sealed it behind him. No one had seen him since. Most people assumed he'd died in there, alone and in agony. Elara knew better. She didn't know how she knew. There was no evidence, no proof, just a feeling, bone deep and persistent, that somewhere inside those walls, Kyle Draven was still alive, still fighting, still refusing to give up. Still here, huh? Elara turned. Standing a few feet away, arms crossed, was Rhea, one of the few wolves in Asheville who didn't actively try to hurt her. Rhea was a scout, mid-30s, with short-cropped hair and a scar running down the left side of her face from a border skirmish years ago. She'd lost an eye in that fight, wore a patch over the empty socket. She didn't like Elara, but she didn't hate her either, which, in Asheville, counted as friendship. Still here, Elara confirmed. Rhea tilted her head toward the sealed gates. You really think he's alive in there? Yes. Based on what? A hunch? Elara hesitated. A feeling, Rhea snorted. A feeling, great. That'll hold up real well when the council asks why you're wasting medical supplies on a corpse. He's not a corpse. Then what is he? Rhea stepped closer, voice dropping to something that wasn't quite concern, but wasn't hostility either. Because I've been part of the perimeter patrol for 2 years, Elara. I've walked these walls every night. I've listened at the gates. I've checked every window, every crack, every possible breach. There's no sound, no movement, no sign of life. If Kyle Draven's in there, he's either dead or so far gone it doesn't matter. Elara met her eyes. If there's even a chance he's alive, I have to try. Why? Rhea's voice softened, just a little. Why does it matter so much to you? You didn't even know him. Because my father helped destroy him. Because I need to believe something good can come from all this. Because if I stop trying, I don't know who I am anymore. Elara didn't say any of that. Instead, she said, because no one else will. Rhea studied her for a long moment, one-eyed gaze sharp and assessing. Then she sighed, the sound heavy with something that might have been resignation or might have been respect. You're going to get yourself killed, you know that? Probably. And you're doing it anyway. Yes. Rhea shook her head, half exasperated, half something that looked almost like admiration. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most stupid. Can't it be both? A faint smile tugged at Rhea's mouth. Yeah, I guess it can. She glanced back toward the town, then lowered her voice. Listen, I shouldn't tell you this, but the council's meeting tomorrow night. They're talking about tearing down the fortress, clearing the land. Some of them think it's cursed, and with Kyle officially lost, there's no reason to keep it standing. They want to build a new memorial garden on the site. Elara's stomach dropped like a stone into cold water. They can't. They can, and they will, unless someone gives them a damn good reason not to. Rhea met her eyes. If you really believe he's alive, you need to prove it, soon, because once that vote passes, they'll have a demolition crew up here within the week. Before Elara could respond, Rhea turned and walked back toward the patrol path, boots crunching on gravel, leaving her alone in front of the gates. Elara stared up at the fortress. Prove it. How was she supposed to prove anything when she couldn't even get inside? She tried the front entrance first, like always. The chains didn't budge. She'd tried cutting them before, different tools, different angles, but the metal was reinforced with the same magic as the wards. Touching them made her fingers tingle uncomfortably, like touching something that was almost but not quite electrified. The warding glyphs flared faintly when she pressed her palm against them, a warning hum that made her teeth ache. She'd studied glyphs in her healer training, basic protection symbols, cleansing marks, threshold blessings. But these were different, older, more complex, layered by someone who knew exactly what they were doing and wanted to make sure no one could undo it. So she moved to the side entrance, locked and warded. The servant's door, same. The delivery gate near the kitchens, sealed shut with rust and magic. The cellar grate, welded closed. Elara circled the entire perimeter, checking every window on the ground floor, every crack in the stonework, every possible way in. She'd done this 217 times, and the result was always the same. Nothing. The fortress had been sealed tight, designed to keep intruders out. Or to keep something in. She stopped near the eastern wall, breathing hard, frustration clawing at her chest like a living thing. 3 years. She'd been trying for 3 years, and she was no closer to getting inside than the day she'd started. Maybe Rhea was right. Maybe this was pointless. Maybe Kael Draven really was dead, and she was just too stubborn or too guilty to accept it. Elara sank down onto the ground, back against the cold stone wall, and closed her eyes. Her ribs ached from where Garrick's stone had hit. Her hands were still bleeding from the gravel. The bruise on her shoulder throbbed in time with her heartbeat. She was tired. So tired. Not just physically. Tired in a way that went deeper than exhaustion, into the marrow of her bones, into the parts of herself she tried not to examine too closely. What was she doing here? What did she think was going to happen? That she'd magically find a way inside, heal a man who'd been poisoned by her father's people, and somehow that would balance the scales? That it would make up for 43 dead wolves and a pack torn apart by betrayal? It wouldn't. Nothing she did would ever be enough. I don't know if you can hear me, she said quietly, speaking to the fortress, to the silence, to whatever might be listening inside those walls. But I'm not giving up. I don't care if they tear this place down. I don't care if the whole pack thinks I'm insane. I'm going to find a way to help you. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and old smoke and something else. Something faint and wrong. Sickness. Decay. And then, so faint she almost missed it, she heard something. A sound. From inside the fortress. Elara's eyes snapped open. She pressed her ear against the wall, holding her breath, straining to hear. There. A low, guttural growl. Not entirely human, not entirely wolf either. Something in between, something that sounded like it was tearing itself apart from the inside. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. He was alive. Kael Draven was alive. And he was suffering. Elara stood, hands shaking, mind racing. She couldn't get through the front, couldn't break the wards, couldn't force her way past the chains and the magic and the locked doors. But maybe she didn't have to go through the front. She looked up at the fortress, at the high windows near the top floor, the ones that overlooked the cliffs on the northern side. Dangerous? Stupid. Probably impossible. She'd tried it once before, 2 months ago, and nearly broken her neck. But she'd made it to the window ledge, just long enough to see that the glass was cracked, the wooden frame rotted from years of neglect. Not enough to get through then. But maybe now. Maybe if she brought the right tools. Maybe if she was willing to risk everything. Elara looked at the northern cliff face, calculating the climb in her head. 50 feet, maybe 60. Sheer rock for the first 30, then a narrow ledge, then another 20 feet to the window. She could do it. She had to. Because if the council voted to tear down the fortress, this might be her only chance. She started climbing at dusk. Not because it was safer, it wasn't, but because fewer people would see her. The patrol routes changed at sunset, and there was a gap, about 20 minutes, when the northern side of the fortress was unwatched. Elara waited in the tree line until she saw Rhea and the other scout disappear around the western wall. Then she moved. The first section of the climb was the worst. Sheer rock face, barely any handholds, nothing but friction and determination keeping her attached to the cliff. Her fingers found tiny cracks in the stone. Her boots scraped for purchase on surfaces that felt like smooth glass. The satchel swung awkwardly at her side, throwing off her balance. She should have left it behind, but when she made it inside, she'd need the supplies. Halfway up the sheer section, her left foot slipped. Elara's breath caught as she slammed against the rock face, ribs screaming in protest, fingers clinging desperately to a ledge barely wide enough for her fingertips. Pain shot through her already bruised shoulder. For a moment, she just hung there, heart hammering, staring down at the drop below. Not fatal. Probably. But enough to break bones, enough to end this before it even started. Move, she whispered to herself. Just move. She pulled herself up, inch by agonizing inch, until her boot found purchase on a tiny outcropping. Then another handhold, then another. The narrow ledge was a relief. She hauled herself onto it, breathing hard, and took a moment to rest. Her hands were shaking. Blood from her earlier cuts had made her palms slick. She wiped them on her pants and looked up at the next section. 20 more feet. The window was right there. She could see it now, cracked glass, rotted frame, darkness beyond. Elara started climbing again. This section was slightly easier. More handholds, better footing. But her muscles were screaming now, exhaustion making every movement harder than it should be. 15 feet, 10, 5. Her hand closed around the window ledge. She pulled herself up, got one knee onto the sill, and paused. The glass was still cracked, a spiderweb pattern spreading from the bottom corner. The wooden frame was even more rotted than she remembered, soft and crumbling in places. She pulled the small knife from her belt, the same one she'd used to gather herbs, to cut bandages, to defend herself the one time a drunk wolf had cornered her in an alley. Elara worked the blade into the gap between the frame and the stone. The wood splintered easily, chunks of it falling away like rotten cork. She pushed harder. The frame groaned, shifted, and then gave way completely. The window swung inward. Darkness spilled out. Thick, oppressive darkness, and a smell that made her stomach turn. Sickness. Old blood. Something feral and wrong. Elara climbed through. Her boots hit stone with a soft thud. She fumbled for the small light stone in her satchel, a piece of quartz she'd charged in moonlight, the kind that glowed faintly when warmed. It flickered to life in her palm, casting weak, pale light across what looked like an old storage room. Dust everywhere. Thick layers of it, undisturbed for years. Broken furniture pushed against the walls. And scratch marks. Deep gouges in the stone, like something with claws had tried to tear its way out. Elara's pulse quickened. Kael? Her voice came out barely above a whisper, swallowed almost immediately by the darkness. No answer. She moved forward, light stone held high, stepping carefully over debris. Broken shelves, shattered pottery. What might have been books once, now just mildewed pulp. The corridor beyond the storage room was long and narrow, lined with doors that hung open on broken hinges. She checked each one. Empty. 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 Rooms that had once been living quarters, she thought. Servants' chambers, maybe. Now just hollow spaces filled with dust and silence. Until she reached the last door. It was closed, and from behind it, she heard breathing, slow, labored, painful, like every breath was a battle. Elara's hand trembled as she reached for the handle. Kael, she said again, louder this time, trying to keep her voice steady. My name is Elara. I'm here to help. The breathing stopped. Complete silence. Then, a voice, rough, like gravel scraping against glass, barely recognizable as human. Leave. The word was flat, final, absolute. Elara's hand froze on the handle. I can't. You're hurt. You need... Leave. This time it came out as a snarl, and something slammed against the door from the inside, hard enough to make the wood rattle in its frame. Hard enough that Elara stumbled back, heart racing. I'm not here to hurt you, she said quickly, words tumbling over each other. I'm a healer. I have medicine. Wolfsbane antidote, infection treatments, pain relief. I can help you. I just need... The door rattled violently again. Something was throwing itself against it. Something big. I don't need your medicine, the voice snarled. I don't need your help. Get out of my territory before I tear you apart. Elara pressed her hand flat against the door, feeling it shudder under her palm. I know what happened to you. I know my father's pack poisoned you during the peace talks. I know you were blinded. I know you've been trapped in here for 3 years, and I know you're dying. Silence. Then quieter, almost broken. You don't know anything. Then let me see, Elara said, and her voice cracked despite her best efforts. Let me see, and I'll prove you wrong. For a long moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched so long Elara thought he'd stopped listening, thought he'd decided to let her stand there until she gave up and left. Then she heard the lock click. The door swung open, and Elara Voss came face to face with the broken Alpha. He stood in the shadows just beyond the threshold, but even in the dim light of her stone, she could see the damage. Kael Draven had been a powerful man once, tall, easily 6'2", 6'3", with the broad shoulders and lean muscle of someone trained for combat from childhood. The kind of presence that commanded a room without effort, that made people straighten their spines and choose their words carefully. Now he looked like something barely holding itself together. His clothes were torn and filthy. What might have been a shirt once reduced to rags that hung off a frame too thin for his height. His hair was long and tangled, dark strands falling past his shoulders in matted clumps. His face was gaunt, cheekbones too sharp, skin too pale, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. Which he hadn't. But it wasn't the physical deterioration that made Elara freeze. It was his eyes. They were pale silver, so pale they looked almost white in the dim light, clouded, unfocused, blind. But it wasn't just the blindness. It was the way he moved, like a predator, like something that had forgotten how to be human and was only remembering in fragments. You shouldn't be here, Kael said, his voice still rough, still dangerous, like he hadn't used it for anything but growling in months. Maybe years. He tilted his head slightly, nostrils flaring. You smell like them, like the pack that destroyed me. Elara swallowed hard, forcing herself not to step back. I'm not them. You're a Voss. He took a step forward. She held her ground, barely. I can smell your bloodline. You reek of treachery and poison and everything that took my life from me. My father's dead, Elara said quietly. He was tried and executed for what he did. The others too. I had nothing to do with the attack. I didn't even know it was happening. Kael laughed, bitter, broken, the sound of something that had given up on joy a long time ago. And you expect me to believe that? No. Elara straightened, forcing herself to meet those unfocused eyes, to hold steady, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. I don't expect you to believe anything, but I'm here anyway, and I'm not leaving until you let me help. Kael went completely still, not the stillness of calm, the stillness of a predator deciding whether to strike. Then slowly, a smile curved his mouth, sharp and humorless, and nothing like the smile she'd seen once, years ago, in that treaty hall. You have no idea what you're asking for, he said softly, dangerously. Then tell me. He moved fast, faster than she expected, faster than someone half-starved and poisoned should be able to move. One moment he was across the room. The next, he was right in front of her, so close she could feel the heat of his breath, could see the fine tremor in his hands that suggested he was using every ounce of control not to attack. I'm not the man I was, Kael said, voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. The poison didn't just take my sight. It took everything. My control, my rationality, my humanity. Some days I don't even know who I am anymore. Some days I'm more wolf than man, and the wolf doesn't care about treaties or politics or who's innocent. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise, hard enough that she felt bones grind together. And you walk into my prison and offer help like it's something simple, like I'm something that can be fixed. Pafum, wotsutesid. Elara didn't pull away, didn't flinch, just looked at him steadily and said, maybe you can't be fixed, but maybe you don't have to be alone while you fall apart. Kael's grip tightened until she couldn't help the small gasp of pain that escaped. Then, abruptly, he let go. He stepped back like she'd burned him, breathing hard, and for the first time, Elara saw something other than rage in his expression. She saw exhaustion, bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion. Get out, he said quietly. before I do something we both regret. Elara opened her satchel with trembling fingers and pulled out a small vial, wolfsbane antidote, the strongest she'd been able to brew. 3 weeks of work. She set it on the floor between them, careful not to approach, giving him space. I'll leave, she said, but I'm coming back tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until you either let me help or kill me trying. She turned toward the door. Why? Kael's voice stopped her. Elara looked back over her shoulder. He was still standing in the shadows, pale eyes unfocused, but somehow still finding her in the darkness. Why? He asked again. Why does it matter to you? You don't know me. You owe me nothing. Your pack's debt was paid with your father's execution, so why do you keep coming back? Elara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, simply, because someone has to believe you're worth saving, even if you don't. She left before he could respond, climbed back out the window, down the cliff face, hands shaking so badly she nearly fell twice. Made it to the ground as full dark settled over the valley. Walked back to the healer's cottage she'd claimed as her own on the outskirts of town, locked the door behind her, and finally, let herself collapse. Her whole body was shaking. She'd done it. She'd gotten inside. She'd seen him. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd just made the most reckless decision of her life. Kael Draven was alive. But he was barely holding on, and Elara had no idea if she could actually save him, or if trying would destroy them both. Elara didn't sleep that night. She sat at the small wooden table in her cottage, cleaning the cuts on her palms by candlelight, replaying every second of the encounter in her head. The way Kael had moved, too fast, too fluid for someone who should barely be able to stand. The tremor in his hands when he'd gripped her wrist. The exhaustion in his voice when he'd told her to leave. And those eyes. Pale silver, clouded with blindness, but somehow still seeing more than she wanted them to. She'd left the wolfsbane antidote on his floor. Would he use it? Or would pride keep him suffering in the dark, refusing help from anyone, especially someone with her last name? The candle burned down to a stub. Dawn crept through the gaps in the shutters. Elara forced herself to eat, stale bread, hard cheese, water from the well. Her body needed fuel even if her stomach rejected the idea of food. She was repacking her satchel when someone pounded on the door. 3 heavy knocks. Official. Aggressive. Elara opened it to find 2 pack enforcers standing on her doorstep. She recognized one of them, Marcus, a man in his 40s with gray streaking his beard and the kind of eyes that had seen too much violence to be surprised by anything anymore. The other was younger, maybe mid-20s, with the eager cruelty of someone still trying to prove himself. Elara Voss, Marcus said, voice flat and professional. The council requests your presence. Now. Her stomach dropped. What for? You'll find out when you get there. She knew better than to argue with enforcers. Let me get my... Now! The younger one repeated, stepping forward like he was hoping she'd resist so he'd have an excuse to drag her. Elara left the satchel, pulled on her coat, followed them into the cold morning air. The council hall sat at the center of Asheville, a stone building that had weathered centuries of pack politics and power struggles. Elara had been inside it exactly 3 times in her life. Once as a child, watching her grandfather receive a commendation for service. Once during her father's trial. Once after, when they told her she could stay in the territory as long as she never caused trouble. She was about to break that agreement. The council chamber was a circular room with high ceilings and narrow windows that let in cold light, but not much warmth. 7 wolves sat in high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle, all of them older, all of them looking at her like she was something stuck to the bottom of their boots. Rhea stood off to the side, arms crossed, face carefully neutral. She didn't meet Elara's eyes. Elara Voss. The voice came from the center chair. Elder Moira, a woman who'd been on the council since before Elara was born. Her hair was white, her face mapped with wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. Do you know why you're here? No, Elder. Don't lie. Moira leaned forward. You were seen near the fortress last night, climbing the northern cliff face, breaking into sealed territory. Elara's pulse kicked up, but she kept her face calm. I was checking the perimeter. The outer walls are crumbling. If they collapse during winter storms... You went inside, another council member cut in. This one was younger, maybe 50, with the build of a fighter gone soft. His name was Dorian. He'd lost a daughter in the poisoning. Don't insult us by pretending otherwise. We have witnesses. Elara looked at Raya. Ria's jaw tightened, but she still didn't meet Alara's eyes. Betrayal tasted like copper on Alara's tongue. If you already know what I did, why are you asking? Because we want to hear you admit it, Moira said coldly. We want you to stand there and confess that you violated the council's direct order. That fortress was sealed for a reason. No one enters. No one disturbs what's inside. Those were the terms of your continued residence here. Elara straightened her spine. He's alive? Silence. Then Dorian laughed, harsh and disbelieving. Alive? Kyle Draven has been declared lost for 3 years. The fortress is a crypt. Whatever you think you heard, I didn't hear him. I saw him. Alara's voice cut through the room. I spoke with him. He's alive and he's suffering, and if you tear down that fortress like you're planning, you'll be executing your own alpha. Moira's expression didn't change. Kyle Draven is no longer our alpha. He abandoned his duties. He sealed himself away and left this pack leaderless during one of the most vulnerable periods in our history. Whether he's alive or dead is irrelevant. Irrelevant? Elara stared at her. He was poisoned during a peace negotiation, blinded, attacked by people who were supposed to be allies. And instead of helping him, you locked him away and pretended he didn't exist. We gave him every resource, another council member snapped. Healers, medicine, time to recover. He refused all of it. He sealed those gates himself. We didn't lock him in. He locked us out. Because he was dying and didn't want you to watch, Elara shot back. Because whatever that poison did to him, it didn't just take his sight. It took his control. And he was too proud to let anyone see him like that. Moira stood slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You seem to know a great deal about the Alpha's condition for someone who claims to have just met him. Elara realized her mistake too late. How long have you been sneaking into the fortress? Moira asked quietly. Days? Weeks? Last night was the first time I made it inside. But not the first time you tried. Elara said nothing. Moira circled around the council table, moving with the deliberate slowness of a predator in no hurry. You've been obsessed with that fortress since you arrived in Ash Vale, walking up there every day, examining the walls, testing the locks. Why? Because someone needed to care whether he lived or died. No. Moira stopped directly in front of her. Because you're trying to atone for what your father did. You think if you save Kyle Draven, it'll somehow balance the scales, that it'll make up for the 43 wolves your family murdered. I don't think that, Elara said quietly. Nothing I do will ever make up for what happened. Then why? Because it's the right thing to do. Moira studied her for a long moment. Then she turned back to the council. The vote stands. The fortress will be demolished within the week, and Elara Voss... She looked back at Elara. You are hereby banished from Iron Peak territory. You have until sunset tomorrow to leave. If you're found here after that, you'll be arrested and tried for trespassing on sealed land. The words hit like a physical blow. Banished. Elara had known it was a possibility. Had known every time she walked through Ashvale that she was one mistake away from losing even this tenuous place in the world. But hearing it said out loud made it real. You can't demolish the fortress, she said, voice shaking despite her best efforts. Not while he's still in there. He made his choice, Moira said. Now we're making ours. Then let me get him out first. Give me 3 days, just 3 days to... Sunset tomorrow, Moira repeated, not a moment longer. Marcus stepped forward, hand on her arm. Come on. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Elara shook him off. If you do this, you're no better than the people who poisoned him. You're just killing him slowly instead of all at once. Moira's expression didn't flicker. Escort her out. Marcus's grip tightened. The younger enforcer moved to her other side. Together they pulled her toward the door. Elara twisted, looking back at the council. You're cowards, all of you. You'd rather tear down a fortress than face the possibility that your alpha might still need you. No one responded. The door closed behind her with a sound like a coffin lid. They didn't escort her all the way home, just to the edge of the council square. Then Marcus let go of her arm and said quietly, You should have stayed out of it. Elara pulled her coat tighter. Would you have? Marcus was quiet for a moment, then, No, probably not. He glanced at the younger enforcer, who was watching them with suspicious eyes. You've got until sunset tomorrow. If I were you, I'd be gone by noon. The council's being generous with the timeline, but the pack won't be. Generous, Elara repeated bitterly. You're alive, Marcus said. That's more than your father got. He walked away before she could respond. Elara stood there in the empty square, cold wind cutting through her coat, and tried to figure out what to do next. Sunset tomorrow. Less than 36 hours. She couldn't get Kyle out of the fortress in that time. She'd barely gotten herself in, and even if she could reach him again, convince him to leave, he was in no condition to travel. Blind, weakened, barely holding on to his humanity, he wouldn't survive the journey to the nearest neutral territory, which left one option. She had to go back inside, had to try one more time to help him before the demolition crew arrived. Had to do it tonight, because by tomorrow, the fortress would be under constant guard. Elara started walking toward her cottage. She needed supplies, better climbing equipment, more medicine, food that wouldn't spoil, bandages, a plan that was better than climb through window and hope for the best. She was so focused on the mental checklist that she almost didn't notice the crowd gathering ahead. Almost. They were waiting outside her cottage. Maybe 20 wolves, maybe more. Young ones, mostly. The kind who'd grown up hearing stories about the poisoning, who'd lost siblings or parents or friends, who'd been taught that the Voss name meant traitor. Garrick stood at the front. He had a torch in one hand. Elara stopped walking. Council banished you, Garrick called out. Sunset tomorrow. That means you've got no protection anymore. No agreement keeping you safe. I'm still here until tomorrow, Elara said carefully. That was the ruling. The ruling said you had to leave. Didn't say we had to let you stay comfortable while you packed. He gestured to the cottage. That's pack property. You've been squatting in it for 3 years. Time to give it back. Elara's hands clenched into fists. Everything she owned was in that cottage. Her grandmother's journals, her mother's healing tools, the few things she'd salvaged from the house before they burned it. Don't do this, she said quietly. Why not? Someone in the crowd yelled. You took everything from us. My father took from you. I didn't. You're his blood. Garrick stepped forward. That makes you guilty. He threw the torch. It arced through the air, spinning end over end, and landed on the cottage roof. The old thatch caught immediately. Flames spread fast, hungry and bright in the gray morning light. Elara ran forward, but hands grabbed her, pulled her back. She fought, twisting, trying to break free, but there were too many of them. Let me get my things, she gasped. Please, just let me. No. Garrick's voice was flat, final. You don't get to take anything. You don't get to leave with memories or comfort or anything that makes you feel like you belonged here. The cottage was fully engulfed now. Smoke poured from the windows. The door collapsed inward. Everything inside, 3 years of careful living, every possession she had left, burned. They held her there and made her watch. When the roof finally caved in, sending sparks spiraling into the morning sky, they let her go. Elara collapsed to her knees in the dirt, staring at the ruin, and felt something inside her break. Not her resolve. Her fear. She'd spent 3 years trying to be good, trying to follow the rules, trying to earn a place in a pack that would never forgive her. And it hadn't mattered. They'd taken everything anyway. So what was left to lose? Elara stood slowly. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from rage. Pure, clean rage that burned hotter than the cottage fire. She looked at Garrick. You want me gone? Fine, I'm gone. But I'm going back into that fortress first, and I'm getting Kale Draven out, and there's not a single thing you can do to stop me. Garrick laughed. You can't even get inside. I got in last night. The laughter died. You're lying. Ask Raya. Ask the council. I was in there. I spoke with him, and I'm going back tonight. Elara stepped forward, and something in her expression made Garrick step back. You can burn my house. You can banish me. You can hate me for the rest of your lives. But you can't stop me from trying to save someone who actually deserves it. She turned and walked away. No one tried to stop her. She went to the Healers Guild first. It was a small building on the eastern edge of town, run by an elderly wolf named Petra, who'd been training healers since before Elara was born. Petra had never been cruel to her, never been kind either, just professional, distant. Elara knocked on the door. Petra opened it, took one look at her, and sighed. I heard about the cottage. I need supplies, Elara said. I can pay. I have... She stopped. She didn't have anything. Everything she could have traded had just burned. Please, I'll work it off. I'll do whatever you need, but I need medicine and I need it now. Petra studied her for a long moment, then she stepped aside. Come in. The guild hall smelled like dried herbs and old books. Shelves lined every wall, filled with jars and bottles and bundles of plants. Petra moved through it with the ease of long familiarity, pulling items down, setting them on the counter. Wolfsbane antidote, she said, not looking at Elara. Infection treatments, pain relief, fever reducers, silvervale moss. This is the last of my supply, so use it carefully. Blackroot extract, sterile bandages. She kept adding to the pile. Nutrient paste. It tastes terrible, but if he hasn't been eating properly, his body needs the density. And this... She held up a small dark bottle. If the poison has affected his mind, this might help. Might not. I've never seen anyone survive what they did to him. Elara stared at the supplies. I can't pay for all this. I know. Petra finally met her eyes. Consider it a loan. When you get settled somewhere else, send payment if you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. Why are you helping me? Petra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Because I trained your grandmother. She was the best healer I ever taught, and she would have wanted someone to try, even if it's impossible. Elara's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Petra began packing everything into a worn leather satchel, much larger than the one Elara had lost. If you're really going back into that fortress, you need to understand something. The poison they used, it wasn't designed to kill quickly. It was designed to destroy slowly, body and mind. Kale Draven has been fighting it for 3 years. Even if you can treat the physical symptoms, the psychological damage, she trailed off. Just be prepared for the possibility that the man you're trying to save might not exist anymore. He's still in there, Elara said quietly. I saw him. What did you see? Elara thought about those pale silver eyes. The way Kyle had moved, too fast, too controlled, like he was constantly one breath away from losing himself completely. Someone who's barely holding on, she admitted. But holding on anyway. Petra nodded slowly. Then maybe there's a chance. She handed over the satchel. The demolition is scheduled for 3 days from now. You won't have much time. I know. And the council will have guards posted by tonight. After what you told them, they'll be watching the fortress. I know that too. Petra's expression softened slightly. You're either very brave or very foolish. Everyone keeps saying that. Elara adjusted the satchel strap over her shoulder. I think I'm just tired of doing nothing. She left before Petra could respond. The sun was setting by the time Elara made it back to the fortress. She'd spent the afternoon gathering what supplies she could: a coil of rope from an abandoned barn, a better knife stolen from a vendor who'd turned his back for 30 seconds too long, a small tent and bedroll that someone had left outside to air, now rolled tight and strapped to her pack. If she was going to be banished, she might as well deserve it. The fortress loomed against the darkening sky. Elara could see lights moving around the perimeter, torches carried by guards. Rhea had been right. The council wasn't taking chances anymore. She counted the patrol patterns: 4 guards, rotating in pairs, 1 circuit every 20 minutes. The northern cliff face was still unwatched. Either they didn't think anyone would be crazy enough to climb it in the dark, or they were hoping she'd try and fall. Elara waited until the nearest patrol passed. Then she moved. The climb was harder at night. No moonlight yet, just stars and the faint glow from the town below. Her hands found holds more by memory than sight. The new rope helped. She'd tied it around her waist, secured the other end to a sturdy tree at the base. If she fell, it might catch her. Might break her ribs in the process, but better than breaking her spine. Halfway up, her boot slipped. Elara slammed against the rock face, breath knocked out of her lungs, fingers clinging desperately to a crack barely wide enough for her fingertips. The rope went taut, cutting into her waist, holding her weight. She hung there for a moment, gasping, heart hammering. Then she kept climbing. The window was exactly where she'd left it, still broken, still dark. Elara hauled herself through, landed hard on the storage room floor, and lay there for a moment, just breathing. Every muscle screamed, her ribs ached, her hands were bleeding again. She didn't care, she was inside. Elara pulled the light stone from her pocket and made her way through the familiar corridor to the last door. It was open this time. She stepped through cautiously, light held high. The room beyond was larger than she'd expected. What had probably been a study once. Bookshelves lined the walls, most of them empty now, books scattered across the floor like someone had torn through them, looking for something. A desk in the corner, overturned. Scratch marks on the walls. A bed in the far corner, blankets tangled and filthy. And sitting on the floor in the center of it all, back against the wall, was Kyle. He looked up as she entered. Those pale silver eyes found her unerringly despite the blindness. "You came back," he said. His voice was different tonight, clearer, less growl, more human. "I told you not to." Elara set the satchel down. "I don't follow orders well." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "I noticed." He tilted his head slightly. "You smell like smoke." "They burned my house." The smile disappeared. "Your pack?" "My former pack," Elara corrected. "I've been banished. Sunset tomorrow, I'm officially unwelcome in Iron Peak territory." Kyle was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because of me. Because of a lot of things. But yes, breaking into your fortress was the final straw." "Then leave." He said it without heat, just statement of fact. "Go somewhere they can't reach you. Start over." "I will," Elara said, "after I get you out of here." "I'm not leaving. The council voted to demolish this fortress. They're bringing a crew in 3 days. You don't have a choice." Kale's expression didn't change. "Then I'll die when it comes down." Elara crossed the room and knelt in front of him before she could think better of it. Close enough that she could see the fine tremor in his hands, the way his jaw clenched like he was fighting something internal. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you rather die than leave?" "Because out there," he gestured vaguely toward the window, "I'm weak, blind, broken. Everything an alpha shouldn't be. And here, at least, no one has to see what I've become." "What if I don't care what you've become?" Kyle laughed, bitter and sharp. "You should." "Well, I don't." Elara opened the satchel and started pulling out supplies. "I'm going to treat your wounds. I'm going to try to counteract whatever that poison is still doing to you. And then we're going to figure out how to get you out of here before this whole place comes down on our heads." "You're wasting your time." "Probably." She uncorked the wolfsbane antidote. "But it's my time to waste." Kyle reached out suddenly, hand closing around her wrist. Not painful this time, just firm, stopping her. "Why?" he asked again, and this time there was something raw in his voice. "Why do you care?" Elara met those blind silver eyes and told him the truth. "Because 3 years ago my father helped destroy you, and I have to believe that means something, that it matters, that I can do something to balance the scales, even if it's just this one impossible thing." She paused. "And because you're the only person in this territory who hasn't treated me like I'm already guilty." Kale's grip loosened. "I don't know if you're guilty or not. Does it matter?" He was quiet for a long moment, then quietly, "No, I suppose it doesn't." He let go of her wrist. Elara lifted the antidote to his lips. "Drink this. It's going to taste terrible, but it should help with the poison still in your system." Kyle took it without protest, drank it in one swallow, made a face. "You weren't kidding about the taste." "I never joke about medicine." Despite everything, he smiled. And for the first time since she'd met him, Elara saw a glimpse of the man he used to be. Strong, sharp, still fighting, even when everything said he should give up. "I need to check your injuries," she said. "Is that okay?" Kyle hesitated, then nodded. Elara worked carefully, methodically, checking his eyes first. The cloudiness was from the poison, nerve damage that might be permanent. Then his hands, tremors from muscle degradation, but the bones were intact. His ribs, too prominent, signs of malnutrition. Old scars from wounds that had healed badly, fresh ones that hadn't healed at all. She treated each injury with the supplies Petra had given her, cleaned infections, applied salves, wrapped bandages where they were needed. Kale sat through it all in silence, occasionally flinching but never pulling away. When she was done, Elara sat back. "When did you last eat?" "I don't remember." That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Elara pulled out the nutrient paste Petra had packed. This is going to taste worse than the antidote, but your body needs it. Kale took it, ate without complaint. When he was done, he said quietly, "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get you out of here. I told you, I know what you told me, but I'm not leaving you to die when the demolition starts. So we can do this the easy way, you walk out with me, or the hard way. Your choice." Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Real laughter this time, rough from disuse, but genuine. "You're insane," he said. "I've been told." "And stubborn." "That too." "And you have no idea what you're getting into." Elara smiled. "Then I guess you'll have to tell me." Kale's expression shifted, something complicated crossing his face. Then he reached out, hand finding hers in the dark, and squeezed once. "All right," he said quietly. "We'll try it your way." Relief flooded through her. "Really?" "Really." He paused. "But if this goes wrong, if I lose control out there, you run. You understand? You don't try to help. You just run." Kale, "Promise me. Promise." Elara looked at him, this broken alpha who'd been fighting alone for 3 years, who was trusting her despite every reason not to. "I promise," she lied, because there was no chance in hell she was running, not when she'd finally gotten him to say yes. The lie tasted bitter on Elara's tongue, but she swallowed it down and started planning. Getting Kale out of the fortress wouldn't be simple. He could barely walk more than a few steps without his legs shaking from muscle atrophy. The climb down the northern cliff was impossible. She'd barely made it herself with full strength and both eyes working. And the front entrance remained sealed with chains and wards that neither of them could break, which left only one option. She'd have to break the wards from the inside. "There has to be a control point," Elara said, pacing the length of Kale's room while he sat against the wall, tracking her movement by sound alone. "Whoever sealed this fortress put the wards up from somewhere, a central location. If we can find it, maybe we can take them down." "The main hall," Kale said quietly. "There's a warding stone in the center. My father installed it generations ago. It's keyed to alpha blood." Elara stopped pacing. "Your blood?" "Yes. So you could take the wards down. Right now. You could have left any time." Kale's jaw tightened. "I know. Then why didn't you?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was so soft she almost missed it. "Because I was afraid of what I'd do if I got out." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with 3 years of isolation and fear. Elara moved closer, crouched down in front of him. "What does the poison do to you, exactly?" Kale's hands clenched into fists. She could see the fine tremor running through his fingers, the way his whole body seemed to be holding itself together through sheer will. "It burns," he said. "Constantly. Like fire in my veins. Some days it's just background noise, painful but manageable. Other days it's all I can feel. And when it gets bad enough, I lose myself. I'm not Kale anymore. I'm just instinct, hunger, rage." He paused, breathing carefully. "I've torn this room apart 3 times. Broken furniture, clawed the walls until my fingers bled. Once I destroyed everything in here, including the door, and I don't even remember doing it. I just woke up surrounded by wreckage with blood under my nails." "When was that?" 6 months ago, maybe 7. Time doesn't mean much in here." He looked up, those pale eyes finding hers with unsettling accuracy. "I almost shifted that time. Not fully. Just enough that I wasn't human and wasn't wolf. Something in between that wanted to tear everything apart, including myself." Elara pulled out the dark bottle Petra had given her. "This might help. It's a sedative mixed with a mental stabilizer. If you feel yourself losing control, take a dose. It won't fix the problem, but it might give you enough clarity to hold on." Kale took the bottle carefully, turning it over in his hands like he was memorizing its shape. "You came prepared. I had help." She didn't mention Petra's warning about the psychological damage. Didn't mention that the old healer had basically told her this was a lost cause and she should save herself the heartbreak. "Can you walk?" "Short distances. Maybe 100 steps before my legs give out." "The main hall. How far is it from here?" Kale tilted his head, considering. Through the corridor, down the central staircase, across the greeting chamber. Maybe 200 steps total, 250 if we're being conservative. 250 steps for someone who could barely manage 100. Elara did the math in her head. If they moved slowly, stopped frequently for rest, they might make it in 30 minutes. An hour if his legs failed completely and she had to half carry him. "We'll take it in sections," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I'll support you. We move at your pace. Rest when you need it. And if I lose control halfway there, then I use the sedative on you. It might not be enough. Then I'll figure something else out." Elara stood and offered her hand. But sitting here arguing about all the ways this could go wrong isn't going to help. So let's just try. Kale stared at her outstretched hand for a moment, like he was trying to remember the last time anyone had offered him help without fear or pity. Then he reached up and took it. His grip was stronger than she expected, calloused, warm despite everything. She pulled, and he rose to his feet, swaying slightly but staying upright. "Ready?" she asked. No, but he didn't let go of her hand. "Let's go anyway." They made it 15 steps into the corridor before Kael's legs started shaking. Elara stopped immediately, guiding him to lean against the wall. "Rest. I'm fine." "You're shaking. That's not fine. Rest." He didn't argue further, just pressed his back against the cold stone and focused on breathing. His chest rose and fell too quickly, like even this small exertion had cost him more than it should. Elara watched him carefully, noting the pallor of his skin, the way sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chill in the air. 3 years of malnutrition and poison had destroyed what should have been a powerful frame. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, but too thin now, all sharp angles and wasted muscle. "How long since you've eaten real food?" she asked. Kale's laugh was bitter. "Define real food. There were supplies in the storage rooms when I first sealed the fortress. Dried meat, preserved vegetables, grain. I rationed them for maybe a year. After that," he shrugged. "There are rats in the walls. Sometimes birds get in through the broken windows upstairs. I ate what I could catch." Elara's stomach turned. "That's not enough to sustain you. I know. But it kept me alive. Barely." He turned his head toward her, and even though his eyes couldn't focus properly, she felt the weight of his attention. "Why are you really doing this?" "I told you. No, the real reason, not the guilt or the atonement speech. Why you specifically? There are other healers in this territory. Other people who could have tried to help, people with actual standing in the pack who might have had a chance of convincing the council. But you're the one who kept coming back. You're the one who climbed a cliff face in the dark. Why?" Elara leaned against the opposite wall, considering her answer carefully. She could give him another version of the atonement speech. Could talk about responsibility and duty and all the noble-sounding reasons that would keep the conversation safe. But he'd asked for the truth. And maybe he deserved it. "Because when I was 15, she said slowly, I watched you at that treaty gathering, the one my father brought me to. I sat in the back while all the adults argued over territorial boundaries and trade agreements, and I saw how you handled it. Everyone else was posturing or politicking or trying to gain advantage, but you just listened. You heard what people actually needed instead of what they were saying. And when you made decisions, they were fair, not easy, not popular, just fair." Kale's expression shifted to something she couldn't quite read. "And I remember thinking," Elara continued, "that if more people led like that, maybe wars wouldn't happen. Maybe packs could actually trust each other. Maybe my father wouldn't have felt like poison was the only answer." She paused. "I know that sounds naive. I know one good leader doesn't change everything. But you were proof that it was possible, that someone could have power and use it well. And when I found out what my father had done to you, I couldn't let that be the end of the story." Kael was quiet for a long time. Then, "You're remembering someone who doesn't exist anymore." "Maybe. But pieces of him are still in there. I saw it when you smiled earlier, when you agreed to try leaving, when you took the medicine without arguing." Elara met his blind eyes steadily. "The poison didn't destroy you, Kael. It just buried you. And I'm betting we can dig you back out." His jaw clenched. "You're going to be disappointed." "Probably. But I'm used to disappointment. It's basically my primary emotional state at this point." Despite everything, Kael laughed. Brief and rough, but genuine. Come on, we're wasting time. They continued down the corridor, Elara staying close enough to catch him if he stumbled. He didn't stumble, but the effort of staying upright was written in every line of his body. The central staircase was worse. 30 steps down, each one requiring careful navigation. Kyle gripped the railing with white-knuckled intensity, and Elara positioned herself slightly below him, ready to brace his weight if his legs gave out. They didn't give out. But by the time they reached the bottom, he was shaking so badly his teeth chattered. I need to rest, he said, the words barely more than a gasp. Sit. Elara guided him to the floor, back against the wall. Just breathe. We've got time. That was a lie, and they both knew it. Every minute they spent in here was a minute closer to dawn, closer to the patrols changing, closer to someone noticing she'd gone back inside and raising an alarm. But Kyle didn't need the additional pressure. She pulled out the nutrient paste again and pressed it into his hands. Eat this. He took it without arguing this time, ate mechanically, like his body was going through the motions while his mind was somewhere else entirely. When he handed back the empty container, his hands were steadier. How much further? He asked. Through the greeting chamber. Maybe 100 more steps to the warding stone. Kale's head fell back against the wall. I don't know if I can make it. Yes, you can. You don't know that. You're right, I don't. Elara sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. But I know you made it this far, and that's further than you've gone in 3 years. I know you're still fighting even when every reasonable person would have given up. And I know that if we stop now, the council tears this place down in 3 days and we both lose. So we keep going. He turned his head toward her, and even without clear sight, his expression was searching. You're annoyingly optimistic for someone whose life is falling apart. It's a survival mechanism. If I stop being optimistic, I have to face reality, and reality is pretty bleak right now. Does it work? Ask me when we're out of here. Kyle smiled faintly. Then the smile faded, and his whole body went rigid. Elara. The change in his tone sent ice down her spine. What's wrong? I can feel it starting. The burn. It's... His breath hitched. His hands clenched into fists. The bottle. I need the bottle now. Elara grabbed the sedative, uncorked it with shaking fingers, and pressed it to his lips. How much? Half. No more than half, or I'll pass out completely, and you won't be able to move me. She tilted it carefully, watching his throat work as he swallowed. The muscles in his neck stood out like cords, his whole body fighting something invisible and terrible. When he'd had enough, she pulled the bottle away and corked it again. For a moment, nothing happened. Kale sat there, breathing hard, eyes squeezed shut, every muscle taut with tension. Then, slowly, the rigidity began to ease. His breathing evened out, his hands unclenched. Better? Elara asked quietly. Yes, but it won't last long, maybe 20 minutes before it comes back. He opened his eyes, those pale, clouded eyes that somehow still managed to convey urgency. We need to move now. She helped him up and they stumbled forward into the greeting chamber. It was massive, easily large enough to hold 200 wolves during pack gatherings. High vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow above them. Tall windows lined the walls, shuttered and dark, letting in no light from outside. And in the center of it all, raised on a circular platform, stood a single pillar of dark stone, the warding stone. It pulsed faintly with silver light, magic humming through it in waves that made Elara's teeth ache and her skin prickle. She'd felt ward magic before. Healers used minor protection spells on medicine stores and sensitive equipment, but this was different, older, deeper, the kind of magic that had been laid down by someone who knew exactly what they were doing and had power to spare. There, Kyle said unnecessarily, his voice rough with exhaustion. They crossed the chamber together, Elara supporting most of his weight now. His legs were barely functioning, more dragging than walking. By the time they reached the platform, he was essentially dead weight in her arms. 3 steps up, Elara warned. Can you manage? Have to. They made it up together, though Elara wasn't sure afterward how they'd managed it. Kyle collapsed against the pillar, one hand pressed flat against the carved surface. The stone was covered in symbols she didn't recognize, pack marks probably, genealogies traced back through generations of alphas. What do I need to do? Elara asked. Nothing, just don't touch me once it starts. The magic reads alpha blood directly. If you're in contact when it happens, he trailed off. What happens? I don't know. No one's ever been stupid enough to try. He took a breath. Step back. Give me space. Elara backed up 3 steps, watching carefully. Kael's hand remained pressed against the stone. He closed his eyes, and she saw his lips moving, saying something too quiet for her to hear. A prayer, maybe. Or just counting breaths, trying to stay calm. The silver light flared brighter. Then Kael started screaming. Not words, just raw, agonized sound that tore from his throat like something breaking inside him. His whole body convulsed, back arching, muscles seizing. His hand was locked against the stone like it had been fused there, like he couldn't pull away even if he wanted to. Blood began seeping from his nose, his ears. Elara lunged forward instinctively. Kael! Don't! He managed to gasp between screams. Don't touch me, it's reading. My bloodline has to verify, has to finish. The light exploded outward in a massive wave that knocked Elara completely off her feet. She hit the stone floor hard enough to drive the air from her lungs. Her head cracked against the ground, and stars burst across her vision. For a moment, she just lay there, gasping, trying to remember how breathing worked. When her vision cleared and she could see again, Kael was on his knees beside the pillar, breathing in ragged gasps, hand still pressed against the stone. Blood dripped from his nose and ears, dark against his too pale skin. But the silver light was gone. And outside, beyond the shuttered windows, she heard a sound that made her heart leap. The chains falling. The heavy iron chains that had sealed the main doors for 3 years, crashing to the ground with a sound like thunder. The wards had dropped. Did it work? Elara managed, pushing herself into a sitting position. Her head throbbed and everything spun slightly, but nothing seemed broken. Kael nodded weakly. It's done. The fortress is unsealed. Anyone can enter now. Anyone can leave. Relief flooded through her so intensely it was almost painful. Then we can get out. We can... The main doors burst open with a sound like breaking bones. Guards poured through, not the 2 or 4 from the regular patrol. At least 20 of them, maybe more, armed with weapons and torches, spreading out across the greeting chamber in organized formation like they'd practiced this exact scenario. And walking through the center of them, calm and composed as if she'd been expecting this all along, was Elder Moira. Elara Voss, she called out, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Step away from the Alpha. Elara's heart dropped like a stone into freezing water. They'd known. Somehow they'd known she would try this tonight, which meant someone had told them. Someone had been watching. She looked at Kael. He was struggling to lift his head, barely conscious from whatever the warding stone had done to him when it read his blood. His eyes were unfocused, even by his usual standards, and blood still dripped steadily from his nose. No way he could fight. No way he could run. He could barely stay upright, which meant this was over before it even started. I said step away, Moira repeated, and now the guards were moving closer, forming a tightening semicircle around the platform. Elara stood on shaking legs and placed herself between them and Kael. No. Moira's expression didn't change. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You wanted the wards down. They're down. The fortress is open. Let us leave. The wards were never the problem, child. Moira climbed the platform steps slowly, deliberately, like she had all the time in the world. The problem is what happens when a broken alpha is let loose on a pack that's spent 3 years learning to function without him. The problem is instability, danger, risk. He's not broken, Elara said, hating how her voice shook. He's surviving. Surviving isn't enough. Not for an alpha. Moira stopped a few feet away, close enough that Elara could see the lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the weight of 3 years of pack leadership she'd never asked for. Kael Draven was a good alpha once, strong, fair, exactly what this pack needed during difficult times. But that man is gone. What's left is a liability, a risk we cannot afford to take. Behind Elara, Kael's breathing had gone very quiet, too quiet. So what's your plan? Elara asked, trying to keep Moira's attention focused on her, trying to give Kael time to recover or escape, or do anything except sit there bleeding. Lock him back in here? Tear the fortress down with him inside? No. Moira's eyes were cold and sad at the same time, the expression of someone who'd made a terrible decision and convinced herself it was necessary. We're going to do what should have been done 3 years ago. We're going to put him down, cleanly, mercifully, end his suffering before it gets worse. The words hit like a physical blow, like being punched in the chest hard enough to crack ribs. You can't, Elara whispered. We can. We have the council's approval, the pack's support. This isn't cruelty, Elara, it's mercy. Ending his pain before he hurts himself or someone else, before the poison destroys what little remains of who he was. He's standing right here. He can hear you talking about murdering him. I know. Moira looked past Elara to Kael, and her expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, Kael, truly. You deserve better than this, but this is the kindest option we have left. Elara heard movement behind her, heard the scrape of Kael's boots against stone as he forced himself to stand. When he spoke, his voice was rough but steady, carrying the weight of authority she'd heard in that treaty hall years ago. Don't apologize to me, Moira. If you're going to kill me, at least have the spine to own the decision without pretending it's kindness. Call it what it is, political expediency. You've built a power structure without me, and bringing me back threatens it, so you're eliminating the threat. That's honest, that I can respect, but don't dress it up as mercy. Moira's jaw tightened. You don't understand what we've been through. I understand that you're afraid. Kael took a step forward, swaying but staying upright. And I don't blame you for that, but fear doesn't justify this. Marcus? Dorian. Moira's voice was flat. Take him. 2 guards moved forward, hands on their weapons. Elara didn't think, just reacted. She grabbed the spent lightstone from her pocket, useless for light now but still solid, still heavy, and threw it as hard as she could at the nearest guard's face. It hit with a satisfying crack. The guard stumbled back, cursing, hand going to his bleeding nose. Then Elara turned and grabbed Kael's arm. Run. I can't. Yes, you can. Move now. They ran, not toward the main doors. Those were blocked by guards, and Moira, and no possible chance of escape, but toward the side corridor, the one that led to the old servant quarters and kitchens. The route Elara had memorized during her earlier exploration, back when she'd been searching for any way into this fortress. Shouts erupted behind them. Heavy footsteps thundered across stone, orders being barked. Kael was barely keeping up, legs shaking violently, each step a battle against muscles that had atrophied from 3 years of limited movement. But he moved anyway, driven by sheer stubborn will, or maybe just survival instinct kicking in despite everything. They made it to the corridor. Down the narrow hallway, Elara half-dragging Kael when his legs failed completely. Through a door that she slammed shut behind them, throwing the old iron bolt. It wouldn't hold long. The wood was rotted, the bolt rusted, but maybe it would buy them 30 seconds. Where are we going? Kael gasped, breathing so hard he could barely form words. Kitchen. There's a delivery door, might still be accessible. They stumbled through the dark servants' quarters, rooms Elara had never fully explored during her reconnaissance, filled with broken furniture and scattered belongings left behind when the fortress was sealed. Dishes smashed on floors, clothing rotting in corners. The detritus of lives interrupted mid-motion and never resumed. Behind them, something slammed into the door they'd bolted. Once, twice. The wood splintered with a crack like breaking bones. Faster, Elara urged, pulling Kael forward. I'm trying. His leg gave out completely. Elara went down with him, hitting the floor in a painful tangle of limbs. Her knee cracked against stone and pain shot up her leg. Get up, she said, scrambling to her feet and pulling at his arm. Kael, get up, we have to… I can't. His voice was barely a whisper, all strength gone. I'm done. My legs won't work, just leave me. Go. No. She hauled him upright through sheer, desperate strength, getting his arm over her shoulders, taking his weight. I didn't come this far to leave you now. The door behind them exploded inward, wood fragments scattered across the floor. Guards poured through the opening. Elara looked around frantically. They were in what looked like an old pantry, shelves on all sides lined with broken jars and spoiled food, a single high window on the back wall letting in faint starlight, no other exits visible. Trapped. The guards formed a solid wall across the only doorway, weapons drawn. Behind them, Elder Moira appeared, looking tired but grimly satisfied. It's over, Elara, she said quietly. Let him go. Elara's mind raced. No weapons except the knife at her belt, which would be useless against 20 armed guards. No escape route except that high window, which Kael couldn't possibly reach even if he could climb. Kael himself could barely stand, let alone fight. But there was one thing they hadn't accounted for, one thing she still had. She pulled out the sedative bottle, still half full from when Kael had taken his dose earlier, and uncorked it with shaking fingers. "If you come any closer," she said, voice trembling but steady enough, "I'll give him the rest of this. All of it. He'll go unconscious, and you'll have to carry a dead weight out of here, and I promise you, I will fight every single step. I will scream. I will make this so loud and so public that the entire pack will know exactly what you're doing. Every wolf in Ashvale will hear me, and they'll know you're executing their alpha without trial, without challenge, without following a single law that's supposed to protect pack members." Moira's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing. Try me." For a long moment, no one moved. The guards shifted uneasily, glancing at each other. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. A public execution, maybe, but not dragging an unconscious alpha through the streets while a witness screamed murder. Then Kael's hand closed around Elara's wrist. Gentle, but firm. "Don't," he said quietly. "It's not worth it." "Yes, it is." "Elara." "You don't get to decide this," she said fiercely, turning to look at him. "You don't get to give up because they're too afraid to let you try. You don't get to die because it's easier than fighting." Kael's pale eyes found hers, and she saw something in them she hadn't expected. Acceptance. He was ready to die, had probably been ready for years, maybe since the day he'd sealed himself in this fortress. And he was asking her to let him go. The fight drained out of Elara like water through cupped hands. The bottle slipped from her fingers, hit the floor with a crack, the remaining sedative spilling across the dirty stone in a dark puddle. Moira nodded to the guards. "Take him, carefully. No unnecessary violence." They moved forward, hands reaching for Kael. And that's when everything went catastrophically wrong. Kael's whole body went rigid, every muscle locked. His hand on Elara's wrist tightened until bones ground together and she gasped in pain. A sound tore from his throat. Not quite human, not quite wolf. Something caught between that was pure agony. The burn had come back. Stronger than before. Worse than before. The sedative hadn't stopped it, just delayed it, and now it hit with 3 times the force. "Kael," Elara started. He threw her backward with enough force to send her crashing into the shelves. Pain exploded through her shoulder and ribs. Glass jars shattered around her. She hit the floor hard, gasping, trying to get air back into her lungs. When she looked up, Kael was changing, not shifting fully into wolf form. That would have been natural, controlled, the kind of transformation any wolf could manage. This was something else, something fundamentally wrong. His spine curved at an unnatural angle, bones cracking and reforming with sounds that made Elara's stomach turn. His hands elongated into claws, not the clean transformation of shifting, but something twisted, fingers stretching and breaking and reshaping into weapons. His face distorted, jaw extending, teeth lengthening into fangs, but the bone structure didn't follow proper wolf anatomy. It was caught halfway. Human and beast merged into something that shouldn't exist. And his eyes, those pale silver eyes that had found her so unerringly despite blindness. They'd gone completely black. No iris, no white, just solid darkness like looking into empty voids. The nearest guard didn't even have time to scream. Kael moved faster than anything that size should be capable of moving, crossing the space between them in less than a heartbeat. His claws tore through the guard's leather armor like it was paper, through flesh and bone beneath with the same ease. Blood sprayed across the stone floor in a wide arc. The guard went down without a sound, dead before he hit the ground. Complete chaos erupted. Guards surged forward, weapons raised, shouting orders that no one could hear over the sounds of violence and terror. Someone was screaming. Maybe multiple people. Kael tore through them like they were nothing more than obstacles in his path. Not fighting with strategy or skill or any kind of technique, just pure savage instinct unleashed. Claws and teeth and impossible strength that shouldn't exist in someone who'd been starving for 3 years. Elara watched in frozen horror as he ripped apart everything in his path. This was what he'd been afraid of. This was why he'd locked himself away for 3 years, suffering alone in the dark rather than risk this exact scenario. This was the monster the poison had been trying to create, finally unleashed. And she had helped free him. "Fall back," Moira was screaming, all composure gone. "Everyone fall back, get out now." But it was too late for at least 3 of the guards, maybe 4, maybe more. Elara couldn't tell through the blood. She forced herself to stand despite the pain shooting through her ribs and shoulder. She had to do something, had to stop this before Kyle killed everyone in this room, before he became the exact thing the council claimed he was, before he destroyed himself completely. Kale's head snapped toward her. Those black void eyes locked onto hers. And he started moving in her direction with deliberate predatory intent. Every instinct Elara possessed screamed at her to run, to get away from the thing wearing Kyle's face, but moving like death incarnate. But she'd promised herself she wouldn't run, promised she'd stay no matter what happened. So she stood her ground, feet planted, and met those terrible eyes. "Kyle," she said, voice shaking but clear, "I know you're in there. I know you can hear me." He kept coming, slow and deliberate now, like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere left to go. "You're stronger than this. You've been fighting it for 3 years. Every single day you fought it. You can fight it now." 10 feet away. 5. His claws were still dripping with blood. "Please," Elara whispered, "come back to me." 3 feet. Kale stopped. His whole body was shaking, muscles convulsing violently, like 2 massive forces were battling inside him for dominance. The black in his eyes flickered. A hint of silver broke through, disappeared, flickered again. Elara took a careful step forward, moving slowly, deliberately. "That's it. Just hold on. Just a little longer. You're almost there." She reached out with trembling hands and pressed her palm flat against his chest. His heart was racing beneath her touch, beating so hard and fast she could feel it through skin and bone and whatever twisted transformation the poison had forced on him. The rhythm was erratic, unstable, like an engine about to tear itself apart. "Come back to me," she whispered, looking up into that distorted face, searching for any sign of the man underneath. "Please, Kyle, come back." For a moment nothing happened. Then Kyle's hand, clawed and wrong and still covered in blood, came up slowly and covered hers where it rested against his chest. The blackness in his eyes flickered again. Silver pushed through, stronger this time. His breathing changed, becoming less ragged, more controlled, and with a sound that was half scream and half sob, a sound of pure anguish and desperate relief, Kyle collapsed. Elara caught him, barely, and they went down together in a heap on the blood-slicked floor. Around them, the remaining guards were regrouping near the doorway, weapons still raised but no one moving to attack. Moira stood among them, surveying the carnage with an expression of grim, terrible satisfaction. All Elara could focus on was the man in her arms. He was breathing in ragged gasps, body slowly returning to something approaching human. The claws receding, the bone structure of his face shifting back toward normal. His eyes, when they opened, were silver again, clouded but focused on her face. "I told you," he whispered, voice wrecked. "I told you to run." "I don't listen well," Elara managed, throat tight. "Remember?" He almost smiled. Then his eyes rolled back and consciousness left him completely. Elara held him tighter, looking up to find herself surrounded by guards with weapons pointed at her, at Kyle, at both of them. And Elder Moira standing in the doorway with 4 dead guards behind her, looking at Elara with an expression that was part vindication and part deep, weary sadness. "Well," Moira said quietly, breaking the heavy silence, "I think we've just proven exactly why he can't be allowed to live." Elara held Kyle tighter against her chest, his blood, or maybe the guard's blood, she couldn't tell anymore, soaking through her clothes. "You're not taking him." Moira's expression didn't change. She looked down at the bodies scattered across the floor, at the blood pooling between broken shelves and shattered glass, at the carnage that had taken less than 2 minutes to create. "Child, look around you. 4 guards dead, 6 more wounded, 2 of them critically. This is exactly what we were trying to prevent." "He was poisoned 3 years ago, and you left him to rot," Elara shot back, voice raw. "You cornered him, threatened to execute him, and then acted surprised when the poison responded to the stress. You triggered this. And what happens next time?" Moira stepped closer, boots squelching in blood. Next time someone threatens him, next time he feels cornered. How many more people die before you admit he's too far gone? Elara's mind raced, searching desperately for any argument that would work, any leverage she could possibly use. Then she remembered something Kyle had said earlier, back in his room when they'd been planning this doomed escape. The warding stone was keyed to alpha blood, which meant Kyle was still, technically, the alpha of this territory. The council could vote all they wanted, could make decisions and give orders, but they hadn't formally replaced him, hadn't gone through the challenge rituals that pack law required for succession, which meant he still had authority here, if she could invoke it before they killed him. "You can't execute him," Elara said, forcing her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "Not without a formal challenge." Moira's eyes narrowed dangerously. He abdicated his position when he sealed himself away for 3 years. "Show me the document. Show me where he officially stepped down, where he named a successor, where he went through any of the proper protocols." Elara held Moira's gaze. "You can't because it doesn't exist. Kael Draven never formally abdicated. He just disappeared. Which means under pack law, he's still your alpha, whether you like it or not." The remaining guards shifted uneasily. One of them, Marcus, the older enforcer who'd escorted her to the council hearing, lowered his weapon slightly. Moira's jaw clenched. "The council declared him lost. Lost isn't dead. Lost isn't abdicated. Lost is a placeholder term you used because you didn't want to deal with the reality of the situation." Elara's voice grew stronger. "Pack law is clear. An alpha holds power until death or formal succession. Kael is alive. He hasn't named a successor. He hasn't gone through challenge combat, which means killing him without following proper protocol isn't an execution, it's murder. And every wolf here knows it." Silence fell across the blood-soaked room. Marcus was the first to speak. "She's right, technically. Technically doesn't matter when, Moira started. "It matters when the law is the only thing holding this pack together," Marcus interrupted, and Elara had never been more grateful for his presence. "We spent 3 years telling ourselves we were maintaining order, following rules, doing things properly. We can't throw all that away the moment it becomes inconvenient." Another guard spoke up, younger, voice shaking. "My father died in the poisoning. I hate what was done to us. But Marcus is right. If we kill an alpha without challenge, without trial, we're no better than the people who attacked us." Moira looked around at her guards, at the doubt spreading across their faces, and Elara could see the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. "Fine," Moira said finally. "We'll convene a full-pack council. Tomorrow at dawn. They'll decide what happens." She gestured sharply to the guards. "Take them both to the holding cells. Separate cells. Post guards on both. And someone get healers in here for the wounded before we lose anyone else." Guards moved forward carefully, keeping their distance from Kael's unconscious form like he might wake up and attack at any moment. Marcus approached Elara, expression unreadable. "Let us take him. Don't make this harder." Elara wanted to refuse, wanted to fight them all, protect Kael with her own body if necessary. But she was exhausted, injured, and completely out of options. If she fought now, they'd just hurt her and take him anyway. She released her grip on Kael and let them pull him from her arms. They hauled him up roughly, 2 guards supporting his dead weight. His head lolled forward, blood still dripping from his nose and ears. He looked like a corpse already. Other guards grabbed Elara, yanking her to her feet with less care than they'd shown Kael. Pain shot through her injured shoulder and ribs. She bit back a gasp. As they dragged them both toward the doors, Moira called out, "Elara!" Elara looked back. The elder stood among the bodies, backlit by torchlight, looking ancient and tired. "You bought yourself one night. Use it wisely. Because tomorrow, when the full pack sees what he did here, they will demand blood. And I intend to give it to them." The guards pulled Elara through the doorway before she could respond. They were separated in the corridor. Kael was hauled left toward what Elara assumed were the fortress's old dungeons. She was dragged right, out through the main entrance, now open, chains lying broken on the ground, and down the hill toward Ashvale proper. Dawn was just starting to break over the eastern ridge. The sky was the color of old bruises, purple and gray and sick yellow. A few early risers were already moving through the streets, and they stopped to stare as the guards marched Elara past. Word would spread fast. By midday, the whole pack would know what happened, would know that Kael had killed 4 guards. would know that Elara had tried to help him escape, would know that tomorrow the council would decide their fate. The holding cells were beneath the council hall, carved into bedrock generations ago. Cold, dark, damp enough that moss grew in the corners and water dripped constantly from the ceiling. They threw Elara into the furthest cell and slammed the iron door with a clang that echoed off stone walls. She was alone. Elara sank down onto the stone bench that served as the cell's only furniture and let herself shake. Adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and pain from a dozen injuries she'd been ignoring. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd hit the shelves. Her ribs ached with every breath, bruised at minimum, possibly cracked. Her knee was swelling from where she'd fallen. Cuts and scrapes covered her hands and arms. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the crushing weight of failure. She'd gotten Kyle out of the fortress, had convinced him to try, had believed stupidly, naively, that they might actually make it, and instead she'd led him straight into a massacre that had proven every terrible thing the council believed about him. 4 guards dead. Because of her. Because she'd pushed him to leave when he'd tried to tell her he was dangerous, when he'd warned her exactly what would happen if he lost control outside those walls. Elara pressed her forehead against her knees and tried not to cry. She failed at that too. Hours passed. The light through the high window shifted from gray dawn to pale morning to harsh midday. No one came. No food, no water, no word about what was happening outside. Elara dozed fitfully, waking at every sound, every drip of water, every distant shout from the streets above. When the cell door finally opened, it was late afternoon and Rhea stood in the doorway. The scout looked terrible. Her face was drawn, the scar on her cheek standing out livid against pale skin. She carried a water skin in a small bundle wrapped in cloth. 5 minutes, Rhea said to someone outside the cell. Then she stepped in and the door closed behind her. Elara sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. Did they send you to gloat? No. Rhea set the bundle on the bench, bread, cheese, dried meat. I volunteered to bring you food because I wanted to talk. About how right you were? How I should have listened when you warned me this was pointless? About how the pack is calling for both your deaths. Rhea sat down on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining careful distance. There's going to be a gathering tomorrow at dawn. Full pack assembly. The council will present the evidence. 4 dead guards, 6 wounded, a fortress full of blood. They'll call for Kyle's execution and your banishment. I'm already banished. This is different. They want you gone from the territory completely. No grace period, no gathering your things. Just immediate expulsion with orders to kill on sight if you ever return. Elara picked up the water skin and drank. The water was cold and clean, and she hadn't realized how desperately thirsty she was until it hit her throat. And Kyle? They're building a pyre in the central square. The water turned to ice in Elara's stomach. They're going to burn him. At dawn. Public execution. They're calling it justice for the guards he killed. Rhea's voice was flat, carefully neutral, but Elara could hear the strain underneath. There will be no trial, no challenge combat. The council is claiming emergency powers to deal with an immediate threat. That's not legal. Legal doesn't matter when the pack wants blood, and the council is happy to provide it. Rhea leaned forward. Listen to me carefully. I can't get you out of here. The guards are doubled, and they're watching both cells closely. But I can tell you this, Kyle is being held in the old armory, 3 levels down, 2 guards on the door. The changing of the watch happens at midnight and again at 4 in the morning. There's a 6-minute gap when the cells are unwatched. Elara stared at her. Why are you telling me this? Because I spent 2 years walking patrol around that fortress, listening to nothing, believing he was dead. And you were right. He was alive the whole time, suffering, and none of us did anything to help. Rhea stood. I can't change what the council decides, but I can give you information. What you do with it is your choice. She knocked on the door. It opened immediately. Wait, Elara said. How is he, Kyle? Is he awake? Rhea paused in the doorway. He woke up an hour ago, asked about you. When they told him you were arrested too, he stopped talking. Hasn't said a word since. She looked back at Elara. Whatever you decide to do, decide fast. You don't have much time. The door closed. Elara sat in the growing darkness, turning Rhea's words over in her mind. 6 minutes. Unwatched cells, 3 levels down. It wasn't much. Probably wasn't enough. but it was something. She forced herself to eat the food Raya had brought, knowing she'd need the energy. Then she examined the cell carefully, looking for anything useful. The walls were solid stone. The door was iron, locked from the outside with no mechanism she could reach. The window was too high and too narrow for escape. The stone bench was built into the floor. Nothing. Elara sat back down and waited for midnight. The hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. The sounds from the street above gradually faded as night fell properly. Torchlight flickered through the window, casting moving shadows across the cell walls. Somewhere around 11, she heard shouting. Angry voices, a crowd gathering. They were building the pyre already, she realized, getting everything ready for the dawn execution, making a spectacle of it. Elara closed her eyes and tried to think. Even if she could somehow get out of this cell, get down to the armory, get past the guards. What then? Kale could barely walk. They had no supplies, no plan, nowhere to go. The entire pack would be hunting them. This was impossible, but she'd been doing impossible things for 3 years now. At midnight, she heard the guards changing outside her door. Footsteps, low voices, the sound of someone walking away while someone else took up position. Elara stood and moved to the door, pressing her ear against the cold iron. One guard. She could hear him shifting weight, the faint clink of armor. She needed him to open the door. Please, she called out, making her voice as weak and pained as possible. I need help. I think my ribs are broken. I can't breathe properly. Silence. Please, she tried again. I just need water or a healer, something. More silence. Then, you get water at dawn. I might not make it to dawn. Please. I'm not asking for freedom, just... She let out a convincing groan of pain. She heard the guard sigh, heard him move closer to the door. Step back from the door, all the way to the far wall. I see you try anything, I leave you to suffocate. Understood? Understood. Elara backed up to the far wall, hands visible, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The guard stepped in, water skin in one hand, other hand on his weapon. He was young, maybe 25, with the nervous energy of someone who'd been told the prisoner was dangerous, but didn't quite believe it. Elara waited until he was 3 steps into the cell. Then she lunged, not at him, at the door. She grabbed the edge and slammed it shut with all her strength. The heavy iron caught the guard completely by surprise, hitting him in the shoulder and sending him stumbling sideways. Elara didn't give him time to recover. She grabbed the water skin from his hand and swung it at his head. The leather bag, still mostly full, connected with his temple with a solid thunk. The guard went down hard. Elara stood over him, breathing hard, half expecting him to get back up. He didn't move. She'd knocked him unconscious, or killed him. She couldn't tell and didn't have time to check. She grabbed his keys from his belt, his dagger from its sheath, and ran. The corridor outside was empty. Rhea had been right about the timing. The watch change left gaps, brief windows where the cells were unwatched. Elara ran for the stairs, taking them down 2 at a time. First level. Second level. Third. The armory was at the end of a long corridor, lit by a single torch. 2 guards stood outside, just like Raya had said. They saw her coming and immediately drew weapons. "Stop right there," one of them barked. Elara didn't stop. She ran straight at them, which was apparently the last thing they expected because they hesitated for a crucial second. She threw the dagger. Her aim was terrible. It went wide, missing both guards entirely and clattering against the far wall. But it distracted them for another second. Elara crashed into the nearest guard like a battering ram, using momentum and surprise to knock him off balance. He went down and she went with him, landing hard on top of him, grabbing for his weapon. The second guard kicked her in the ribs. Pain exploded through her chest, old injuries from earlier screaming in protest. She rolled sideways, gasping, trying to get air back into her lungs. The guard raised his sword. The armory door exploded outward. Kael came through it like a force of nature, moving faster than he should be able to move, faster than anyone blind should navigate. He grabbed the guard with the raised sword and threw him bodily into the wall. The man hit with a crack and slid down, unconscious. The first guard, the one Elara had knocked down, was scrambling to his feet. Kael's hand shot out and caught him by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one arm. "Kael, don't!" Elara started. Kael slammed the guard against the wall once, hard enough to rattle teeth, then dropped him. The man crumpled, out cold, but alive. Kale turned toward Elara, those pale silver eyes somehow finding her in the torchlight. You were supposed to stay in your cell. When have I ever done what I'm supposed to? Elara pushed herself upright, wincing at the pain in her ribs. Can you walk? Can you? I asked first. Despite everything, Kale almost smiled. I can move, for now. The poison's quiet, but it won't stay that way. Then we need to go, now, before... Bells started ringing above them. Alarm bells, shattering the night quiet. Someone had found the unconscious guard in Elara's cell. Too late, Kyle said grimly. Shouts echoed down the stairwell. Footsteps thundering. The entire guard force mobilizing. They were trapped 3 levels underground with the only exit blocked and an entire pack about to descend on them. Elara looked at Kyle, at this broken alpha who'd just saved her life for the second time tonight, and made a decision. The old supply tunnels, she said quickly. The ones that connect the council hall to the fortress. They have to still exist. They were sealed decades ago. Sealed isn't collapsed. If we can find the entrance, it's in the sub-level archive, another level down. Kale grabbed her hand. Can you run? Can you? Guess we'll find out together. They ran. Down another flight of stairs deeper into the bedrock beneath Ashvale. The shouts above grew louder, closer. Torchlight flickered on the stairs behind them. The archive was a maze of shelves and storage crates, decades of pack records gathering dust. Kael navigated it with unsettling accuracy for someone who couldn't see, moving like he'd memorized the layout years ago. Here, he said, stopping in front of what looked like a solid wall. Elara ran her hands over the stone, searching for seams, for any sign of a door. I don't see anything. It's hidden. There... Kyle's hand found hers, guided it to a specific stone slightly different in texture from the others. Push hard. It'll give. Elara put her weight against it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stone shifted inward with a grinding sound. A section of wall swung open, revealing darkness beyond. The smell that wafted out was terrible, stale air and old earth, and something that might have been decay. In, Kyle said. Now. They stumbled through just as the first guards reached the archive entrance. Kale slammed the hidden door shut behind them. Elara heard stone grinding back into place, heard the click of some ancient locking mechanism engaging. Then complete darkness. I can't see anything, Elara said, voice echoing strangely in what felt like a narrow space. I know, stay close. Kale's hand found hers in the dark. The tunnel runs straight for about 100 yards, then angles up toward the fortress. There are side passages, but ignore them. They're older, structurally unsound. How do you know all this? My father made me memorize every escape route in the territory when I was 12. Said an alpha who couldn't flee when necessary was a dead alpha. His grip tightened on her hand. I never thought I'd actually use them. They moved through the darkness together, Kyle leading with the confidence of someone who didn't need eyes to navigate. Elara kept her free hand on the wall, feeling rough stone beneath her fingers, centuries-old chisel marks from whoever had carved this passage. Behind them, faintly, she could hear pounding. The guards had found the hidden door. They'll break through eventually, Kyle said. The lock is old. How long do we have? 20 minutes, maybe 30. Is that enough to reach the fortress? It has to be. They moved faster, half running through the darkness. Elara stumbled over uneven ground, scraped her shoulder against the wall when the tunnel narrowed unexpectedly, but kept moving. The tunnel angled upward like Kyle had said. Steeper, harder to climb. Elara's legs burned, her lungs screaming for more air than the stale tunnel atmosphere could provide. Then she saw light ahead, faint, gray. Dawn light filtering through cracks in stone. They'd reached the fortress end of the tunnel. The exit was another hidden door, this one wedged shut from years of disuse. Kale threw his weight against it once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th try it gave, swinging outward with a shriek of protesting metal. They tumbled out into the fortress's lower storage level, the same area where Elara had first entered through the window days ago. Dawn light poured through the broken window. Outside, she could hear voices. The entire pack gathering in the streets below, surrounding the fortress, blocking every exit. Kale straightened slowly, listening to the sounds. They're not going to let us leave. I know. Even if we make it outside, we'll be hunted. No food, no supplies, nowhere to go. He turned toward her, pale eyes somehow still managing to convey intensity despite the blindness. You should surrender. Tell them I forced you to help me escape. They might show mercy. No. Elara, we're past the point of mercy, Kael. For both of us. Elara moved to the window, looked out at the crowd gathering below. Hundreds of wolves, maybe the entire pack, all of them staring up at the fortress with expressions ranging from fear to rage to grim anticipation. They want a monster. Let's give them one. Kael was silent for a moment. Then, what are you suggesting? Elara turned back to him, an idea forming. Desperate. Insane. Their only chance. Challenge combat, she said. You're still the alpha. You never formally abdicated, which means anyone who wants to replace you has to defeat you in single combat. Pack law. I can barely stand. I'm blind. I nearly killed you twice yesterday. I know, but if you issue the challenge, the pack has to honor it. And if I win, I'm alpha again. Which solves nothing because I'm still poisoned, still dangerous, still exactly what they're afraid of. But you're alive. Elara moved closer. And alive means there's still a chance, still time to find a cure, to heal, to become something other than what the poison made you. Kael's expression was unreadable. You're asking me to fight for a pack that wants me dead. I'm asking you to fight for yourself, because you deserve to live, even if they can't see it yet. Outside, a voice boomed across the crowd. Elder Moira, amplified somehow, her words carrying clearly through the broken window. Kael Draven, Elara Voss, you are surrounded. There is no escape. Surrender now and face justice, or we will come in and drag you out. The crowd roared approval. Kael stood very still, head tilted slightly like he was listening to something beyond the noise. Then he straightened to his full height, and for the first time since Elara had met him, he looked like an alpha. Broken, poisoned, half-blind and barely holding himself together, but an alpha nonetheless. Open the main doors, he said quietly. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it properly. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. You're sure? No, but you're right. Alive means there's still a chance. He reached out, hand finding her face with surprising gentleness. And I'm tired of hiding. They made their way to the main entrance together. The great doors stood open, chains still lying broken where they'd fallen when the wards dropped. Beyond them, the central courtyard was packed with wolves in human form, all of them armed, all of them watching. Elder Moira stood at the front with the remaining council members arrayed behind her. Her expression was grim satisfaction. She'd expected them to run, to hide, to prove themselves cowards as well as criminals. She hadn't expected them to walk out willingly. Kael stepped through the doorway into the dawn light, and complete silence fell. Every wolf there had heard the stories. The broken alpha, the monster in the fortress. 3 years of rumors and fear. Now they could see him, gaunt, scarred, blind eyes pale as death, but standing tall, shoulders back, moving with the kind of presence that made people step back instinctively. Kael's voice, when he spoke, carried across the courtyard with alpha command that demanded attention. I am Kael Draven, alpha of the Iron Peak Pack by right of blood and succession. I've been accused of crimes against this pack. I stand ready to answer those charges in the manner prescribed by our oldest laws. He paused. I invoke the right of challenge combat. Any wolf who believes themselves worthy may face me. If I fall, my challenger becomes alpha, and my crimes are judged by the new leadership. If I win, I retain my position, and this matter is settled. The crowd erupted into chaos, shouting, arguments. Some wolves calling it madness, others calling for immediate combat, still others demanding the council reject the challenge entirely. Moira raised her hand for silence. When she spoke, her voice was cold as winter stone. You're in no condition to fight. This challenge is suicide. Then it should be easy for whoever faces me. Kael smiled, sharp and dangerous. Unless the pack is afraid of a blind, poisoned wolf who can barely stand. Is that it, Moira? Are you all so weak now that even I'm a threat? The insult landed perfectly. Angry growls rippled through the crowd. A wolf stepped forward from the ranks. Young, powerful, burning with righteous fury. Elara recognized him. Dorian's son, one of the guards from last night. "I'll face you," he snarled. "For the guards you murdered. For 3 years of abandoning this pack. For being a coward who hid while we suffered." Kale turned toward the voice, blind eyes somehow finding the challenger. "Then step forward and prove yourself worthy." The young wolf, his name was Garrett, Elara remembered now, moved into the center of the courtyard. The crowd pulled back, forming a circle. Traditional challenge space, no interference, fight until surrender or death. Moira looked between them, calculation written across her face. Then she nodded. "Let the challenge begin." The challenge circle was nothing more than packed dirt and old bloodstains from centuries of combat. Garrett moved into position with the confidence of a wolf in his prime, young, strong, full of rage that had been building for 3 years. He'd lost friends in the poisoning, lost more last night when Kyle had torn through the guards like they were nothing. He wanted blood. Kyle stood opposite him, swaying slightly, still wearing the torn and filthy clothes from his years in the fortress. To anyone watching, this looked like an execution dressed up as tradition. Elara stood at the edge of the circle, hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. This was insane. Kyle could barely walk yesterday. Now he was supposed to fight a trained warrior in his prime while blind and poisoned and half-starved. But pack law was absolute. Once the challenge was issued and accepted, no one could interfere. Moira raised her hand. "The challenge is witnessed. Combat begins when I drop my hand. There are no rules except these. Fight until one yields or dies. The victor's word is law." She dropped her hand. Garrett attacked immediately, coming in fast and low, going for a tackle that would put Kyle on the ground, where his blindness would be a death sentence. Kyle moved, not away, into the attack. He caught Garrett's momentum and used it, pivoting, throwing the younger wolf past him with a technique that spoke of years of training that muscle memory hadn't forgotten. Garrett hit the ground hard, rolled, came up snarling. "You got lucky!" Kale didn't respond, just settled into a fighting stance, weight balanced, head tilted slightly to track Garrett by sound. They circled each other. The crowd was utterly silent now, holding collective breath. Garrett feinted left, struck right. His fist connected with Kale's ribs with a crack that made Elara flinch. Kale staggered but didn't go down. Instead, he grabbed Garrett's extended arm and pulled, using the younger wolf's own force against him again. They grappled, strength against strength. For a moment they were locked together, muscles straining. Then Garrett headbutted Kale directly in the face. Blood exploded from Kyle's nose. He stumbled backward, one hand going to his face instinctively. Garrett didn't give him time to recover. He pressed forward with a combination of strikes, ribs, stomach, face again. Kale blocked some, but not all. Each hit that landed drove him further back, closer to the edge of the circle. The crowd started murmuring. This was what they'd expected. The broken alpha being beaten down by young strength. Garrett landed a solid kick to Kale's knee. The leg buckled. Kale went down to one knee, gasping, blood running down his face from his shattered nose. "Yield," Garrett demanded, standing over him. "You've lost. Just yield, and I'll make it quick." Kale's response was to sweep Garrett's legs out from under him. The young wolf went down hard on his back. Before he could recover, Kyle was on him, moving with that same terrible speed from last night. Not quite human, not quite wolf, something driven by instinct and desperation. His hands closed around Garrett's throat. The crowd erupted. Shouts of alarm, of encouragement, of fear. Garrett clawed at Kyle's hands, trying to break the grip. His face was turning red, then purple. "Kale!" Elara's voice cut through the noise. "Don't kill him! You win if he yields! You don't have to kill him!" For a moment, Kyle didn't react. His hands kept tightening, and Elara could see it happening. The same transformation from last night starting to take hold. His eyes darkening, his breathing changing, the poison responding to violence the way it always did. "Kyle?" She tried again, softer but somehow carrying across the circle. "Come back. You're stronger than this, prove it." Kale's hands loosened slightly. Garrett gasped out, voice barely a whisper. "I yield. I yield." Kale released him immediately and stood, staggering back several steps. Garrett rolled onto his side, coughing, sucking in desperate breaths. Alive. Silence fell across the courtyard. Kale stood in the center of the challenge circle, bloody and shaking, having just defeated a warrior half his age while blind and poisoned. The message was clear. Even broken, he was still dangerous, still an alpha. But he'd also shown restraint, stopped when asked, accepted a yield instead of taking a kill he could have easily claimed. Moira stepped forward slowly. Her expression was complicated, surprise, calculation, and something that might have been grudging respect. "The challenge is decided," she announced. Kael Draven stands as victor. By pack law, his position is recognized. Muttering rippled through the crowd. Not agreement, exactly, but acceptance. The law was the law. Then an older wolf stepped forward from the crowd. Elara recognized him, the gray-haired man who'd confronted her in the street the first day, whose 16-year-old son had died in the poisoning. "I have a question," the man said, voice heavy with grief that hadn't faded in 3 years. "You're Alpha again." "Fine. Law says you are. But what about the guards? The 4 who died last night? Do we just forget them?" Kael turned toward his voice. "No, you don't forget them." He paused, gathering breath. "What happened last night was my fault. The poison in my system makes me dangerous when threatened or cornered. I warned Elara, I warned the council. They chose not to listen, but that doesn't absolve me of responsibility." He straightened despite obvious pain. "I killed 4 members of my own pack. That weighs on me. Their names will be added to the memorial. Their families will receive blood price from what remains of my personal holdings, and I will carry their deaths for the rest of my life, however long that is." The older wolf stared at him for a long moment, then, quietly, "That's more than your predecessor said when my son died." Kael's jaw tightened. "Your predecessor was wrong. I was wrong. I sealed myself away instead of facing what had been done to us. And that abandonment hurt this pack as much as the original attack." He raised his voice so the whole crowd could hear. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm asking for a chance to do better. To be the alpha you needed 3 years ago instead of the one who ran and hid." Someone in the crowd laughed, bitter and sharp. "You can barely stand. You're blind and poisoned and held together by spite. What kind of alpha is that?" "The only kind I know how to be anymore," Kael said simply. "Broken, but trying. That's all I've got." More silence. Then, unexpectedly, Marcus stepped forward from where he'd been standing with the other guards. "I'll support him," the older enforcer said. "Not because I think he's perfect or healed or ready, but because he just fought with a broken body and still chose mercy when he could have chosen violence. That's the kind of judgment we need." Another voice spoke up, one of the wounded guards from last night, arm in a sling, face pale with pain. "He almost killed me, but he also stopped when Elara asked him to. The old alpha wouldn't have stopped, wouldn't have cared." He looked at Kael. "I'll give you a chance. One chance. Mess it up, and I'll challenge you myself." One by one, wolves began stepping forward. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Enough to matter. Moira watched the crowd shift, watched her carefully constructed opposition fracturing, and Elara could see the moment the elder made her decision. "Very well," Moira said. "Kael Draven retains his position as alpha, but—" She raised her voice over the murmurs. "The council will maintain operational authority until such time as the alpha is deemed fully recovered. All major decisions require council approval. All action subject to oversight. You want to lead? Prove you can do it without destroying what we've built in your absence." It wasn't a full restoration. It was a compromise, a cage disguised as cooperation. But Kael nodded. "Accepted. I'll earn your trust back, however long it takes." Moira's eyes narrowed slightly, like she'd expected more resistance. Then she turned to Elara. "And what about her? She broke you out of custody, assaulted guards, violated direct council orders." The crowd's attention swung to Elara. She forced herself to stand straight despite exhaustion and pain, meeting their hostile stares without flinching. Kael spoke before Moira could continue. "Elara Voss saved my life. Multiple times, she climbed into a sealed fortress to help someone everyone else had given up on. She believed I was worth saving when no one else did, including myself. Without her, I'd be dead or so far gone the poison would have won completely." He turned his blind eyes toward where Moira stood. "You want to punish someone for having courage? For showing compassion when this pack had none left to give?" "She's a Voss," someone in the crowd shouted. "Her father murdered our people."
Her father was tried and executed, Kael shot back. She had nothing to do with the attack. She was 17 years old and as much a victim as any of us. You've spent 3 years making her pay for crimes she didn't commit. How much more punishment does one person deserve for the sin of being born to the wrong family?
Elara's throat tightened. She'd expected to fight this battle alone. Hadn't expected Kael to fight it for her. The gray-haired man who'd lost his son spoke again. What do you propose we do with her? Kael was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried alpha command that made everyone listen. I propose we give her what she's earned. Recognition as a healer who served this pack when she had no obligation to do so. A place in this territory without fear of stones or fire or constant harassment. And he paused. I'm claiming her under my personal protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me directly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Personal protection was serious. It meant Kael was taking responsibility for Elara's actions, vouching for her character with his own authority. It also meant something else, though no one said it aloud. It meant he was claiming her as pack, as someone who belonged under his leadership regardless of her bloodline. Moira's expression was unreadable. You're willing to stake your newly restored position on protecting a Voss? Yes, even knowing how the pack feels about her family. Especially knowing that. Kael's voice was steady. This pack has spent 3 years being ruled by fear and hatred. It's made us smaller, meaner, less than what we should be. If I'm going to lead again, it starts with choosing mercy over revenge, with recognizing worth regardless of bloodline, with being better than what was done to us. Silence stretched across the courtyard. Then, slowly, Rhea stepped forward from where she'd been standing with the scouts. I support the Alpha's decision. Elara has more courage than most wolves I know. She deserves recognition, not punishment. Petra, the old healer, spoke from near the back. I've seen her work. She's skilled, dedicated, and she's treated pack members who wouldn't even acknowledge her existence. The girl has earned respect. More voices joined. Not unanimous. Not even a majority, but enough that Moira couldn't dismiss it without looking tyrannical. The elder's jaw clenched. Fine. Elara Voss may remain in the territory under the Alpha's protection, but she fixed Elara with a hard stare. One mistake. One hint that you're following your father's path. And protection won't save you. Understood? Elara nodded, not trusting her voice. Moira turned back to the crowd. The council session is concluded. Return to your homes. We'll convene again tomorrow to discuss operational matters and the Alpha's reintegration. The crowd began dispersing slowly, wolves breaking into small groups, voices rising in heated discussion. Some looked satisfied, others angry, most just confused about what they'd witnessed. Elara moved to Kael's side as the courtyard cleared. He was swaying on his feet, adrenaline from the fight wearing off and leaving behind pain and exhaustion. You need a healer, she said quietly. I need about 12 healers and a month of sleep. He managed a faint smile. But I'll settle for getting out of this courtyard before I collapse in front of everyone. Can you walk? If you help me. She got her shoulder under his arm, taking his weight. Together they made their way toward the fortress. It felt right somehow, returning to the place where this had all started, where she'd first climbed through a broken window and found a broken Alpha in the dark. Inside, away from watching eyes, Kael's legs finally gave out. They sank down together against the wall in the greeting chamber, both too exhausted to make it any further. Elara examined his injuries. Broken nose that would need setting, cracked ribs from Garrett's strikes, countless bruises already darkening. But he was alive. They both were. That was stupid, she said, pulling medical supplies from the satchel she'd somehow managed to keep through everything. Challenging someone in your condition. It worked, didn't it? You almost died. I've almost died approximately 40 times in the last week. I'm getting used to it. He winced as she touched his nose, checking the brake. You could have stayed silent. Let them banish you. You'd be free of this place, free of the judgment and the hatred. I could have, Elara agreed, working to set the broken bone as gently as possible. He hissed in pain but stayed still. But I didn't spend 3 years walking through stones and insults just to give up when it got difficult. Why did you spend 3 years doing that? Kael asked quietly. Real reason. Not the atonement speech, or the guilt, or any of the explanations you gave before. Why you, Elara? She finished with his nose and sat back, considering the question. The real question he'd been asking all along.
Because when I was 15, she said slowly, I watched my father become something I didn't recognize. Watched him justify terrible things by claiming they were for the greater good. Watched him choose hatred over humanity. She met Kael's blind eyes, and I made a promise to myself that I would never become that I would choose differently. Choose compassion even when it was hard. Choose to see people as individuals instead of enemies.
Choose to believe in redemption even when everyone else had given up. That's a heavy burden to carry. So is being alpha. Kael laughed softly. True. He was quiet for a moment, then reached out, hand finding hers. Thank you. For everything, for not giving up even when you should have, for climbing that cliff, for believing I was worth saving. You are worth saving. I killed 4 guards last night.
I know, and you'll carry that. But it doesn't erase everything else you are. Elara squeezed his hand. You're not defined by your worst moment, Kael. None of us are. We're defined by what we choose to do after, and you chose to fight for the chance to do better. That matters. They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, listening to the fortress settle around them. Outside, dawn was giving way to full morning. The sounds of the pack going about their day filtered through broken windows. Eventually, Petra arrived with 2 younger healers in tow. They examined both Kael and Elara with professional efficiency, tutting over injuries and muttering about reckless behavior. You need complete bed rest for at least a week, Petra told Kael sternly, and proper meals. I'm assigning someone to make sure you actually eat, and she held up the dark bottle of sedative that Elara had dropped in the fortress. Someone must have recovered it. This gets used the moment you feel the poison acting up. No waiting, no trying to tough it out. Understood? Kael nodded meekly. Petra turned to Elara. You have 2 cracked ribs, a concussion, and more bruises than I can count. You're staying in the healer's hall for observation. I should stay with Kael. The Alpha has a fortress full of rooms and enough attendants to manage his recovery. You need rest that doesn't involve climbing cliffs or breaking out of cells. Petra's expression softened slightly. You did well, but you're not invincible. Let yourself heal.
Elara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her, making her bones feel like lead and her thoughts slow and syrupy. One night, she conceded. Then I'm checking on him whether you like it or not. Stubborn child, Petra muttered, but there was affection underneath the exasperation. They were helped to separate locations, Kael to chambers in the fortress that were hastily cleaned and prepared, Elara to a quiet room in the healer's hall with a bed that felt impossibly soft after days of stone floors and holding cells. She slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke, late the following evening, Rhea was sitting beside her bed reading a book. About time, the scout said, setting the book aside. Petra was starting to worry you'd slipped into a coma.
Elara sat up slowly, inventory of pains announcing themselves. How long was I out? Since yesterday morning. It's evening now, day after the challenge. Rhea handed her a cup of water. Drink. Then there's someone who wants to see you. Kael. He's been asking about you every hour, driving the attendants crazy. Rhea smiled faintly. But he's recovering. The sedative is helping with the poison episodes. Petra thinks with proper treatment and time, he might actually stabilize. Relief flooded through Elara. And the pack? Mixed. Some people are angry about the challenge outcome. Some are cautiously optimistic. Most are just confused and waiting to see what happens next. Rhea stood. The council is meeting tomorrow to formalize the new arrangement. Moira's not happy about sharing power, but she's pragmatic enough to work with it. And me? You're officially recognized as a pack healer under Alpha protection, which means you get an actual residence instead of a cottage on the outskirts, access to guild resources, and people aren't allowed to throw stones at you anymore without facing consequences. Rhea's expression was serious. It's not forgiveness. A lot of wolves still hate your family name, but it's a start. Elara nodded slowly. A start. That was more than she'd had a week ago. Come on, Rhea said. Get dressed. I'll walk you to the fortress. 20 minutes later, Elara was walking through Ashvale's streets beside Rhea. It was different this time. People still stared, but the open hostility had been replaced by something more complex. Wariness, curiosity, a few nods of acknowledgement that might have been respect. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was different than stones and fire and constant fear. The fortress looked different too in evening light, still damaged, still scarred by 3 years of neglect. But the main doors stood open. Lights glowed in windows. Voices echoed from inside, workers beginning repairs, attendants moving between rooms, the sound of a place coming back to life. Kael was in what had probably been his private study once, sitting in a chair by the window with evening light falling across his face. He'd been cleaned up, injuries treated, wearing fresh clothes that actually fit properly. He looked less like a corpse and more like a person again. He turned his head when they entered. "Elara? How did you know it was me? You have a distinctive walk, favoring your left side because of the cracked ribs." He smiled faintly. "Also, Rhea told me she was bringing you." Rhea cleared her throat. "I'll leave you two alone. Elara, if you need anything, I'll be downstairs." She left, closing the door behind her. Elara moved to the window, standing beside Kael's chair. Outside, the valley was painted in shades of purple and gold as the sun set behind the western ridge. Beautiful in a way she'd forgotten to notice during 3 years of survival. "Petra says you're improving," she said. "The poison's still there. Probably always will be. But it's manageable now with the sedative. I can think clearly most of the time. The episodes are less frequent." He paused. "She also says I'll never regain my sight." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I've had 3 years to adjust to blindness. The rest of it, the pain, the loss of control, that was worse than not being able to see." Kael tilted his head toward her. "Moira came by earlier, outlined the power-sharing arrangement. I'm alpha in name, but every decision gets council review for the next year minimum." "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, relieved. I'm not ready to lead alone yet. Maybe I never will be, but this way I can learn again, rebuild trust, prove I'm capable." He was quiet for a moment. "She also mentioned you're being assigned a residence, one of the restored houses near the healer's hall." "I heard. It's a good location, close to supplies, safe neighborhood." Kael's hand found the arm of his chair, gripping it slightly. "Or you could stay here, in the fortress. There are plenty of rooms, and I'll need a personal healer for a while as I recover." Elara's heart skipped. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a choice. You've spent 3 years on the outskirts, separated from the pack, living in whatever space they tolerate. You deserve better than that. The fortress is your home if you want it. No strings, no obligations, just a safe place to stay." She looked at him sitting there, this broken alpha who'd fought his way back from darkness, and felt something shift in her chest. Not quite love. That would take time, trust, healing on both sides. But the foundation of something that might become love eventually. "I'll stay," she said quietly. "If you're sure." "I've never been more sure of anything." They stood together in the fading light, watching the valley settle into night. There would be challenges ahead, council meetings, pack politics, the slow work of rebuilding trust and structure. The poison in Kael's system wouldn't disappear. The scars from the attack wouldn't fade. Elara would never fully escape her family name, but they'd survived the worst. Survived when everyone said they wouldn't. And that was enough for now. Enough to build on. Enough to hope. 6 months later, Elara walked through Ashvale's market square without a single stone thrown. The gray-haired man whose son had died in the poisoning nodded to her as she passed. Not warmth, exactly, but acknowledgement. Recognition that she existed as something other than a target. The fortress had been partially restored, structural repairs done, living quarters made livable, the worst of the damage addressed. Kael moved through it with increasing confidence, learning to navigate without sight, building back the strength he'd lost during 3 years of isolation. The poison still flared sometimes. On bad days, he'd take the sedative and retreat to his chambers until the burning passed. But the episodes were manageable now, controlled. He hadn't lost himself to the darkness since that night in the fortress when Elara had called him back. The pack was changing too, slowly. Moira still led the council, still maintained strict oversight on alpha decisions, but gradually, carefully, she was loosening the reins as Kael proved himself capable, trustworthy. Not the broken monster they'd feared, but a leader learning to work within his limitations.
and Elara had found her place. Not as an outsider, not as a Voss carrying ancestral guilt, but as a healer who'd earned respect through actions rather than bloodline. She worked in the guild hall 3 days a week, treating pack members who came to her without hostility now. The rest of her time was spent in the fortress, managing Kael's recovery, helping coordinate the restoration work. They'd become partners. Not romantically, not yet, but in every other way that mattered. Two people who'd survived impossible circumstances and chosen to build something better from the wreckage. On this particular morning, Elara was checking inventory in the fortress's restored medical wing when Kael found her. "The council wants to hold a memorial ceremony," he said without preamble. "For everyone who died in the original attack and the aftermath, all 43 from the poisoning, the 4 guards from that night, everyone." Elara set down the herbs she'd been cataloging. "What do you think?" "I think it's necessary. We can't move forward without acknowledging what was lost." He moved to the window, standing in the sunlight. "I want to include your father's name." Elara's breath caught. "What?" "He was executed for his crimes, paid the blood price, and his daughter has spent 3 years making amends for what he did. He deserves to be remembered as part of what happened, not erased like he never existed." Kael turned toward her. "Unless you don't want that, it's your choice." Elara thought about her father, the man who'd raised her, taught her to read, told her stories before bed. The same man who'd poisoned children and shown no remorse. Both things were true. Both were part of the history. "Include him," she said quietly, "but list him separately, with the others who planned the attack. Don't mix him with the victims." Kael nodded. "That's fair." The memorial was held a week later in the central square. The entire pack gathered, hundreds of wolves standing in silence while names were read aloud. Each one a life ended too soon. Each one a piece of pack history that couldn't be forgotten. When they reached the names of the attackers, a few wolves left. Couldn't bear to hear those names spoken alongside their loved ones. But most stayed. Listened as Elara's father's name was read. Listened as the history of what happened was acknowledged in full, victims and perpetrators both. When it was done, Kael stepped forward to speak. His voice carried across the square with alpha command that demanded attention but didn't force compliance.
"We've spent 3 years living in the shadow of this attack," he said, "letting it define us, divide us, make us smaller and meaner than we should be. Today we remember, we honor the dead, we acknowledge what was taken from us." He paused. "And then we choose to move forward. Not to forget, we'll never forget, but to be more than our grief, more than our anger. To build something worth the sacrifice of those we lost." Silence greeted his words. Then slowly, wolves began placing flowers and small tokens at the base of the memorial stone. Offerings for the dead, acknowledgement of loss. Elara placed a single white flower for her father. Not forgiveness, just recognition that he'd existed, that his choices had consequences, that those consequences had brought her here. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd dispersed, the gray-haired man approached her. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, grief carving deeper lines in his face. "Your father killed my son," he said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry." "So am I." He stared at the memorial for a long moment. "But you're not him. I see that now. You're just a kid who got dealt a terrible hand and played it the best you could." He held out his hand. "Truce. Not friendship, but truce." Elara took his hand and shook it, throat tight with emotion. "Truce." It wasn't much. One person's acceptance didn't erase 3 years of hostility or generations of pack politics. But it was something. A start. That night, Elara and Kael sat together in the fortress's restored library, surrounded by books salvaged from the wreckage. Some of them were centuries old, pack histories written by hand and carefully preserved. Kael was teaching himself to read them by touch, running his fingers over embossed letters, learning text through texture instead of sight. "There's a section here about forgiveness in pack law," he said, tracing the page. "Says that true forgiveness isn't forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's acknowledging the pain and choosing to move forward anyway." "Do you think the pack will ever forgive me?" Elara asked. "Some will, some won't. Most will fall somewhere in the middle, not quite forgiving, but not actively hostile either." He set the book aside. Does it matter? I don't know. I want to believe it does. Then believe it. But don't make their forgiveness the measure of your worth. Kael's voice was gentle. You proved your worth by climbing a cliff in the dark, by staying when everyone told you to leave, by believing in redemption when no one else did. That's not something that needs validation from people who weren't there. Elara moved closer, sitting on the floor beside his chair. Do you forgive me? For pushing you to leave the fortress when you weren't ready? For triggering the attack that killed those guards? Kael was quiet for a long time. Then he reached down, hand finding her hair, fingers threading through it gently. There's nothing to forgive, he said. You saved my life. Yes, people died. Yes, it was terrible. But I was dying in that fortress. Maybe not physically, but in every way that mattered. You gave me a reason to fight, a reason to try. I won't apologize for being alive because of that. Elara leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the weight of everything they'd survived. What happens now?
Now we rebuild. The fortress, the pack, ourselves. Kael smiled faintly. One day at a time. No grand plans, no promises we can't keep. Just showing up and trying to do better than yesterday. That sounds exhausting. Probably. But we'll do it together. That makes it easier. They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by history, building their future one quiet moment at a time. Outside, the valley settled into night. The fortress glowed with warm light from dozens of windows. In the town below, smoke rose from chimneys, families gathering for evening meals, life continuing in the steady rhythm that had sustained this pack for generations. Somewhere in that town, wolves who'd thrown stones at Elara were learning to see her differently. Somewhere, guards who'd tried to execute Kael were learning to trust his leadership. Somewhere, a pack torn apart by betrayal and poison was slowly stitching itself back together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. And it would never be what it was before the attack. That innocence was gone forever. But it was honest. It was real. And it was enough. Elara looked up at Kael, at this broken alpha, who'd fought his way back from darkness, who'd chosen mercy over vengeance, who'd given her a place when no one else would. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For letting me stay. For believing I was worth defending. For being exactly who you needed to be even when it was hard. Kael's hand cupped her face gently. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. For refusing to give up when giving up would have been easier. For proving that some things are worth fighting for even when the odds are impossible. He leaned down. She leaned up. Their kiss was soft, tentative, carrying the weight of everything they'd survived and everything they might become. Not a promise of forever. Neither of them was naive enough for that anymore. Just an acknowledgement of now, of this moment, of two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. When they pulled apart, Kael was smiling. Real and unguarded in a way Elara had never seen before. Stay with me, he said. Not a command, a request. Not as a healer or an obligation. Just stay. I'm not going anywhere, Elara promised. You're stuck with me. Good. I was hoping you'd say that. They stayed in the library until late, reading and talking and planning small things, repairs to the fortress's south wing, a new training program for young wolves, a trade agreement with a neighboring pack. Nothing grand, nothing that would change the world, just the steady work of building a life worth living. In the harsh frontier where survival had always decided worth, where strength was currency and weakness meant death, two broken souls had found something different. They'd found that mercy could be stronger than vengeance, that compassion could survive in the coldest environments, that the courage to try, even when failure seemed certain, was its own kind of power. They didn't just endure, they rose. And in rising, they redefined what it meant to be alpha, what it meant to be pack, what it meant to be human in a world that often forgot its humanity. The story of the broken alpha and the healer who refused to let him die would be told for generations, would become pack legend, passed down through bloodlines, altered and embellished with each retelling. But the truth was simpler and more profound than any legend. Two people chose each other when the world said they shouldn't, chose hope when despair was easier, chose to build when destruction seemed inevitable, and that choice, repeated day after day, became the foundation of something stronger than either of them alone. It became home.